All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started in at least on the housekeeping details. Welcome to the 2025 Montana Natural Heritage Program Partners Meeting. Just a reminder, please check that you're muted. And if you have comments during the question periods, please turn on your video so we can see you. If you have updates during the partner session, please coordinate those with your coworkers so that we just have one or two of you presenting. If you have links, we'd like to keep track of valuable links that you want to share with everyone regarding natural resource management in Montana or the surrounding regions. So please put those in the chat at appropriate times, and we'll bundle all those together in a Word document that will go out with a recording of this meeting. If you've got any technical difficulties, please email Braden Burkholder at bburkholder@mt.gov. And then the main reason we do these meetings is to share what we've developed over the last year with your feedback, and then make sure that everybody is aware of the new things that we've developed. So if you need a focal training for your organization, please reach out to me at bmaxwell@mt.gov, and we'll get that set up. And again, we will send out either tomorrow or early next week a recording of the meeting along with all the materials. So thanks for joining us. We've got 70 people and with us now, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I also want to start by thanking our partners, starting with NatureServe. And NatureServe is a coordinating body for all of the heritage programs in the United States and in Canada. And special thanks to the Spatial Analysis Lab at the University of Montana for continuing to help us with land cover mapping in Montana. And also special thanks to the O'Connor Center for the Rocky Mountain West at the University of Montana for their ongoing efforts to map wetland and riparian areas across Montana. Just a reminder of the agenda, and Braden, if you wouldn't mind putting a copy of the agenda in the chat, I'd appreciate that. We'll start off this morning with a welcome from myself and the Digital Library Director, Evan Hammer. Jenny Stapp, the State Librarian, unfortunately is not able to join us today. She got called for jury duty, and we thought she would be able to skip out on that, but they haven't let her go. So she won't be with us today. She sends her regrets to everyone on that front. So, and I know that she really appreciates all of our partners. So, then we're going to move into program updates with our information services program by Braden Burkholder, our botany program, Andrea Pip, our zoology program, Dan Bakken. After that, we'll have a question and answer and polling period. Then we're going to get into land cover and spatial analysis lab updates, wetland riparian mapping updates, and a chance to answer questions about those habitat products. And then we'll take a break. And then for lunch, I'm going to do a training on our new citizen science and iNaturalist pages. So if you're interested in using iNaturalist either yourself or sharing that with partners and using iNaturalist, please join us for that lunch session. After lunch, we're going to do partner sharing. So, and there's been so many changes recently that we would really appreciate your feedback on your organization, how it's doing with the staffing, how it's doing with funding, structural updates that are going on potentially, any initiatives that you have going on, and especially your information needs to let us know how we can help with that. We definitely want to help out wherever we possibly can. And then if you do have PowerPoint slides for that, you can shoot those to me in an email at bmaxwell@mt.gov, or you can put them in the chat. And then finally, we'll end the day with an update on our State Wildlife Action Plan. And Kim Skridonsky is under the gun to actually get that submitted, facing a major deadline with, I think, tomorrow. And so Christina Smucker is going to stand in for her. Christina is the head of the non-game program at Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. So we'll hear from Christina. So for our program, for the Montana Natural Heritage Program, this is a neat time period from the standpoint of 40 years ago in October, the first Montana Natural Heritage Program staff were hired. So I put this slide together summarizing some of the important history points within our program. And again, the goal of our program is kind of summarized in that bottom right triangle. What is it for species and habitats in Montana? What do we call those? Where is it? Where are they distributed across the state with a whole bunch of different spatial products? And the top of that triangle, how are they doing? So in terms of the history, the Nature Conservancy started establishing heritage programs in cooperation with states and provinces dating back to 1974. First program was established in South Carolina in 1974. In 1982, the Montana Governor's Council noted a need for quick centralized access to natural resource information rather than having it spread out across a bunch of agencies. In 83, the legislature established the Heritage Program and the Natural Resource Information in statute. 85, the first staff were hired. The first computer used by the program in 88. First point observation database beginning 1991. First website 94. Release of the field guide 99. I'm going to skip over some of these. Program begins managing information on all native species in 2005. Prior to that, the program really needed to focus on the species of greatest concern. But at that point, we had a little more bandwidth and we're able to expand that out to all native species. In 2007, we released the first version of our map viewer website to show spatial data live on the internet. We had our first predicted habitat suitability models and wetland mapping program began. In 2017, our first standardized environmental summary report that's used in all environmental review, permitting, and planning processes. 2018, we started managing information on non-native species for the first time, and we started releasing Survey 123 forms with our partners to help centralize data more efficiently. And in 2022, we had our first predicted biodiversity layers released. We had enough species modeled that we could start doing that. In terms of the organization of our program, we are housed in the state library under the State Library Commission. We are supported by business and administrative support staff at the library. We have eight full-time positions and some unfunded positions. In the case of our ecology program, a vegetation ecologist, the program absolutely has to have that, but right now that's unfunded. An invasive species data manager is pretty essential if we're going to continue to manage data on invasive species. And there's a clear need for an invertebrate zoologist, and it's also unfunded. Right now, we're trying to meet those needs with those contracted services that you see over on the right side of this slide. And we're contracting with the Spatial Analysis Lab for land cover, the O'Connor Center for Wetland Mapping, Montana Audubon for an avian specialist, LXM Consulting, that's Scott Mintzmoyer for botanical information products, moth information products from IntoQuest Solutions, that's Marion Lyman, bumblebee and butterfly information products from the Xerxes Society, aquatic invertebrate information products from Montana Biological Survey, that's David Stagliano, and Sherry Barron helps us out with some of our core data management. In terms of our budgeting, we receive $593,000+ a year through the state library from general fund and pass-through funds. These are legislative funds from the Montana legislature. And then most importantly, and I can't express this, I can't have a greater appreciation for this than to say thank you so much to our partners for providing the supplemental core shown in the green in the center of this slide. $306,000 this past year from these key partners to just kind of do what we do. They're recognizing that we don't have enough core funding from the Montana legislature, and we're helping meet their business needs. So thank you to those partners and all of our partners. And then we do receive some additional funding for our field work. I also want to especially thank, and Jenny Stapp, and I talked this out, she really wants to thank you. Our partners this last year helped us reduce our administrative cost by moving numerous agreements to multiple year agreements that span state fiscal years and meet the new Montana State Library guidelines for minimum amounts of 50,000 and 30,000 for federal and state agreements, respectively. We just, unfortunately, we're in a time period and in a little bit of state bureaucracy that is necessary. We just can't deal with the smaller agreements at this point. So thank you to all of our partners. So some exciting things for our program this year. We released this new website, and we'd encourage you to play around with it. We are really happy with it in terms of we feel like it's a very simple and intuitive layout and very mobile friendly. And I use it a lot myself on my smartphone at this point. On this new website, we have a new data request system under that request data tab. And we feel like that is all working smoothly at this point and is hopefully more intuitive and easier to use than our previous data request system. We will talk about this at lunch, but we have this new citizen science and also report invasives pages under our collect and submit data tab. And we'll go into details on those. We have 4 new dashboard tools, including this conservation status summary for species that you'll hear more from Dan Bakken. We have that put together for vertebrate species at this point. We have a new, this is not ours, but the USGS has developed this new land cover data set, land cover change tool that I want to share with folks. And we're going to build off of that. And I'll talk about the details of that in the land cover session. Of a new grazing boundary information dashboard, and then also a full suite of tools of beaver restoration and assessment under the beaver restoration and assessment tool. In terms of our core data products, again, this is how we share information on species, both the tabular and spatial information. We're now managing information on 18,100 different species and habitats in Montana, over 500,000 structured surveys. That's anywhere a protocol has been applied to survey for one or more species, over 6 million point observations, over 100,000 species of concern occurrences. So these are polygons for species of concern that we want to highlight in any environmental review permitting planning process to make sure that no harm comes to those species. On the modeling front, we have about 2,300 plus different species modeled, and then we've stacked those together for certain taxonomic groups to create overall biodiversity models. We have range polygons in place now for all of our vertebrates. And excitingly, this last year, we did that for all of our vascular plants that we feel like we can have range polygons out there for. So you'll see those on the field guide, again, for all vertebrates and all vascular plants for the first time. And then we have subnational conservation status ranks assigned to about 5,000 of those species that we manage information on. We've got a long way to go, though. This slide is something that was, again, this is a little out of date from 2022, but the numbers on this slide, everything in black is the numbers of species that are formally described. The numbers in green are numbers or estimated numbers of species in those taxonomic groups. And then the percentages are indicating of how close we are to the estimated numbers. And so, again, the take-home message on this is, and the same is true for us, for fungi, for invertebrates, we probably have a long way to go even in having species described, let alone the ones we have in our data system. On the habitat data products front, we will have a whole session on this new land cover layer that we are in the process of releasing that is based on National Vegetation Classification System group level mapping for our new land cover layer. On the wetland riparian mapping side, we'll hear from McKay Hajek. And importantly, you'll notice in that image on the right side, the red box, the O'Connor Center for the Rocky Mountain West got 15 quads mapped this past year. So we've cleared those off the board. And again, we're still looking for for funding on the order of $3,000 per quad for the 370 quads that are shown in blue there that still need modern NWI wetland and riparian mapping completed. Another exciting new development this last year, we trialed this with you in our partners meeting last year and got a thumbs up from you. But now Dan Bakken has released all vertebrates are showing these new conservation status summary ranking displays and conservation status reports. And we have a few plants that are out and about with this, and those will be coming online in greater numbers in the coming years. And we have a few invertebrates. We've also have this in place for habitats. So that's exciting. And then in the bottom left, since we have all of this rank information database, we can do summaries for entire groups. So Dan Bakken will take you through a new dashboard, a new conservation status summary dashboard for species. And in this case, we have it for vertebrates, but we'll be developing it for invertebrates and plants and other groups as we move forward. Just want to say we bring all of our information together in this environmental summary report. And to remind everybody, we've got training videos on how to interpret and use this environmental summary report, companion Excel, and field guides. Two things I want to say about this environmental summary report. If you could please help us improve it, we would really appreciate it. And basically, there's an example, and Braden, I'll let you put the example in the chat. But in that environmental summary report, there is a suggested contacts. We're trying to, every environmental review process, provide people with contacts in all the federal, state, local agencies and connect them up with people they should be talking to about whatever process they're undertaking. And we also have additional information resources. If you could let us know if there's any contact updates, we'll get that updated and out on our website and in play. So please help us connect up people with the people they need to be talking to. And finally, we this last year put together this information resource page. This is how Montana Natural Heritage Program information is used either at the state level, federal level, with or local laws, presidential and gubernatorial executive orders, rules and regulations at state and federal level, any processes and policies, permits, industry certifications and standards. We want to keep a comprehensive summary of how our information is being used. And at the upper portion of this, in the red text, you'll see there's a form that if we don't have something listed, we'd appreciate you submitting, hey, I use it for this process, so we can include it on this page. This is also going to be a great resource for people using our environmental summary reports. In terms of our data use, on our spatial data, we are now up to over 3,000 total accounts, map viewer accounts, about approaching 1,800 agency accounts. This last year, we had over 2,500 environmental summary report downloads. Those are self-service downloads, and you can see the agency list on the right of this slide and how many staff have agency level access to our Map Viewer web application. We would really appreciate it. This happens all the time when I do trainings. People say, I've been in my position for 2 years and I didn't know about your information products. So please help us get the word out and make sure that people know that we can make their life easier on the information front for environmental review, permitting, and planning processes. On the Montana Field Guide side of things, we had approaching 500,000 users, 660,000 sessions, 1.5 million page views, 10,850 hours of use, and over 7,000 PDF downloads of our field guide. So pretty heavy use continuing, and we hope to grow that. And that's my introductory presentation. And I'm going to turn it over to Evan Hammer for Montana Spatial Data Infrastructure, Water Information, LiDAR, and other state GIS updates. Evan, if you want to share your screen.
Thank you, Bryce. Just getting the share going.
So Evan, while Evan's doing that, Evan oversees the Heritage Program. He also oversees all of the geo information services staff at the State Library and digital library resources in general. Evan,
Thanks,
we
Bryce.
we
Can
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 see
you
it.
see? You can see it well? Okay,
Yep.
perfect. Thanks, everybody. Just want to take a few minutes here, like Bryce said, about the Heritage Program. There's still a lot of resources they find out that people are unaware of. And I just want to be sure all of you are aware of all the other resources that we have here at the State Library that might be useful to you, hopefully professionally and possibly personally as well in your own time. So it'll be fairly quick. Want to mention that I'm not going to dwell on these slides. There's tons of information in here, but of course this will be in with the materials that Bryce provides for you, so you can come back if there are areas that you want to look into in a little bit more detail. One other quick thing, Bryce mentioned 40 years of the Heritage Program. I feel very fortunate. I started here at the State Library in 2009, so shortly after I arrived, I was here for the 25th anniversary and have been here for the 25th and 30th. We had big celebrations. Unfortunately, 35th was during COVID, so we didn't get to celebrate that as much as we would have liked to. So hopefully we'll be doing something to celebrate the 40th as well. Just very exciting stuff there. What I really want to mention, as I said, we've got a lot of services here. As a step back, the State Library, as you may imagine, we do a lot here to serve libraries around the state. And a lot of the resources we make available basically go through libraries. So things like our shared catalog and the Montana Library to Go. If you check out ebooks through Libby, through the Montana Library to Go, that's part of our support of libraries around the state. But the other thing that we do is directly provide resources to patrons, to users. So that's what I want to talk about a little here. Agenda-wise, we'll talk about the digital library programs. Then we'll dig a little deeper into GIS coordination and geospatial data, and then wrap things up. So, of course, the Natural Heritage Program, Montana Natural Heritage Program, is one of our programs that I'm not going to talk about because you're going to hear plenty about that from everyone else today. The most relevant, I think, to a lot of your work is going to be GIS coordination, our water information system, and land information. And I'll talk, of course, about those more. Land information I won't really get into here. In this context, land information is really about kind of legal ownership and rights to land. So we do administrative boundaries, we have the cadastral, and we work with addresses and structures. Maybe of interest to you, but I know probably not primary of interest to most of you. And then I just want to take a minute here to mention our government information resources. We have digitized historic print publications from state agencies. And more currently, we crawl all state agency websites and make that information available through the Internet Archive. And very recently, we've also started crawling county and local government websites to make that archive available. And we also have a limited digital federal documents collection. Jim Kammerer is our government documents librarian. And of course, once you get this slide set, you can click on these links and find more about those programs. I think one thing I'll mention of particular interest here with the web crawling that we do, at the beginning of this year, we were able to get the state to add a page history link to the bottom, the very bottom of all state websites, mt.gov websites. So, for example, if you're looking at the new Heritage website and you're trying to find something you used to see in there and you can't find it now, if you go to the very bottom, you can click on that page history link. Make sure you know what it is. Grab a screenshot, something, send that to Bryce or someone in the Heritage program, and they can help you find out where that is on the new site. So just wanted you to know about that resource. Another program I want to highlight just briefly is the History Portal, a Montana History Portal. This started as kind of a collection of a lot of we reached out to local communities to document their own history. And that has grown substantially, and we've got a lot of good, interesting information there, like oral histories for various areas around the state, yearbooks, things like that. But I wanted to bring your attention to, we've got a good partnership with Glacier National Park, the Glacier National Park History Association. Very large photo archive is available here that may be of interest to some of you in your work. And then more recently, U.S. Forest Service Region 1, we've got a significant photo collection there. And increasingly, we're using this to not exactly archive, but make additional resources of our own available. For many years, we've had the Place Names Companion. There's a book, Montana Place Names, Alzada Zortman, produced by the Historical Society. And we had a companion application for that book. We're going to retire that application, but all the information about those place names is now available in the History Portal. And similarly, our Yellowstone Clearinghouse, so enormous amount of information about the Yellowstone corridor can be found in the History Portal. I'll talk a little bit more time depending on the Montana State Reference Network, which I think I mentioned to you last year. And then lastly, all of these, to this point, everything on the screen that I've mentioned is available to anyone. Research resources, these are specific to state employees. I know we've got a lot of state employees on here, so I want to make sure you knew we have a collaboration with the Trails Consortium out of MSU to get us access, very low-cost access to numerous journals and databases. Of particular interest to many of you might be JSTOR, ProQuest, EBSCO, Science Direct, Data Axle. If you're a state employee, it depends on the resource, but many of these are available directly. If you're already on the state network, you can get directly into those. If you have to work off of the state network, as a state employee or a contractor, you can get a state library card and get access to many of these resources that way. So I want to make sure you knew that. And then, of course, Talking Book Services, those are for blind and low vision. Not to say some of you may be able to take advantage of those resources or have coworkers that have some kind of ability that prevents you or them from reading traditional print publications. And so wanted you to know that that's another resource we provide. With that, jump into GIS coordination. Just wanted to quickly touch on that GIS coordination at the State Library is directed by the Montana Geospatial Information Act. Erin Fashaway is our state GIS coordinator, and she's housed here at the State Library. We also have an advisory council, the Montana Geospatial Information Advisory Council, and we support the Montana Spatial Data Infrastructure with a number of things, including a grant program, our Geospatial Information Plan, and our GIS Coordination Strategic Plan. I wanted to emphasize the council briefly. First of all, because we've got a couple of vacancies, and if you're a tribal government, work in tribal government or related interests, we need a representation. We need some representation there. You don't have to be a GIS person. You just need an interest in geospatial information and or experience there. Similarly, we're looking for private business representation. Also a vacant spot, always looking to fill here. And then the other reason I wanted to put this out there is wanted to make sure that all of you knew that there is some kind of representation. There should be a representation here for pretty much anybody that's on this call. If you're a federal employee, Alan Armstrong from the BLM represents the federal government on that council. State is represented by Nick Youngstrom at DNRC. Local governments, city or municipal governments, Lee Mackles out of Missoula. So there's information here if you want to have a voice or you want to speak out to your rep, you can find that, find out who that person is here and get more information from them. A big part of what we do as GIS coordination is supporting the spatial data infrastructure. I'm not going to talk about the 15 themes that we support, other than to say that we have those 15, and then we'll dig into some of a couple of those that are of primary interest to you guys in a moment. But one thing I want to make sure you're aware of is that we're working to be sure that every one of these 15 themes has working groups. The working groups are open to all. We want your participation. So if there's a theme that you have an interest in, here's a listing of the themes and the leads on those. Reach out to the theme lead and ask them about working groups and how you can participate. Just an example of how we've used the working groups to push imagery and grow the imagery program. And lastly, on the GIS coordination side, I wanted to mention the Geospatial Information Act grant program. We grant out funds for the improvement primarily of those MSDI, Spatial Data Infrastructure Framework layers. And unfortunately, we had to take a couple of years off due to a slowdown in the housing market that impacted our revenues. But we're going to renew that program starting in 2027. It'll be a 2-year program. We used to do those as single-year grants. We're going to try out 2-year program. Eligible recipients include local, state, tribal government entities, and Montana universities. And among the priorities for the coming year will be elevation and hydrography, and the 3DHP, the elevation-derived hydrography, which I'll talk about in just a second. Jumping into some of those key GIS data sets that may be of interest to you, imagery. Hopefully everyone knows that we've been coordinating with the FSA to make NAEP available to NAEP for Montana available to Montanans for roughly 20, or basically 20 years now. We've had 10 NAEP collections since 2005. The excitement is that 2025 is 30 centimeter. So you can see on the left how much sharper that 30 centimeter imagery is going to be. We don't have the TIFF data yet, so we don't have that to distribute, and until we get the TIFF data, we won't have it available as web services yet. But the county mosaics are available, and you can go to the Montana Air Photo browser to access those county mosaics. And hopefully, well, yeah, I'll just say hopefully by the end of the fiscal year, hopefully by June 30th, we'll be able to get the 25. As well as some of you may have noticed that the 2023 collection had some pretty significant gaps that they completed during 2024. And so we hope to get those gaps filled as well as get the 2025 data up. Next, I want to touch on LiDAR, our elevation data set. I'm sure I've touched on this before. We're very close to having complete statewide coverage. This has been ongoing since 2019. This is where things stand right now. So just a small area of central Montana that we aren't yet able to make available through our tools. It is basically, the collection is ongoing in those areas. So everything else is collected and processed. Anything in green you can get now. And then those areas that we haven't hit, our collection is in progress right now, as well as some recollects in a few areas around the state. And this is just one I just like to highlight. This is a really cool poster that our GIS folks put together. This is coming out of, this is the Gardner Canyon coming out of Mammoth up to Gardner, flooding of 2022, I believe. By chance, the 3DEP program had collected LiDAR for this corridor shortly before the flooding. and then they reflew it shortly after. And so on the far right, you can see red areas where there was loss of materials, purple areas where materials were gained. Um, and you can imagine the historic elevation data sets, 30 meter and more recently 10 meter. This would have just been a few pixels, but now you can really see some great definition of the materials lost in here and the materials gained. The other cool thing here is up in the top left corner, when they abandoned this road, they had to shore up a new road heading out of Yellowstone to the north. And you can see some purple there where they've added more material to improve that road. So just some neat stuff that you can see with that high resolution, 1 meter basically elevation data. Along with just, well, the core products that we make available from the LiDAR are the Bare Earth digital elevation model, digital surface model, canopy height model, hillshade data set, and an intensity image. I think I know what most of those are, but the intensity image, I can't tell you. Troy would be your resource for this. Troy Blandford is our water information system manager. I have some contact info at the end of this slideshow, so if you need to get a hold of him. Additionally, in certain areas, we have point clouds, water break lines, control points, reports metadata, building footprints. And we have some contours, and we're working on an automated process to make 1-foot contours that we can generate on demand as people need them. You can get the data from our Montana LiDAR inventory. There is also LiDAR data available through the USGS National Map Explorer. And if you're interested in the differences, what you can get in one versus the other, or the formats, all that information is in here for you to peruse in your own time. The last area I wanted to emphasize is hydrography. Of course, the National Hydrography Data Set is kind of the historic standard for hydrography across the state. You've probably seen bits of that. I don't know if you've seen the whole thing laid out in a map, but there it is. As we complete our collection of statewide elevation, high-res elevation data, we're transitioning to improving the hydro data set, elevation-derived hydrography coming off of that LiDAR data. And here's an area where you can see the difference. What shows up to me is kind of an orangish salmon is the existing NHD flow lines. And then you can see driving those from the LiDAR data, much more definition in the hydro data set. We're just kicking this off. If you saw before, our elevation program, our LiDAR collection program started in 2019, so 6 to 7 years. These are long-term projects, long-term investments to realize these outcomes. We're just getting going here. We're looking for partners. If you're going to be in an area and you need high resolution, we certainly seek funding, but even if you're not able to fund it, if you have a need in an area, please reach out to us so we can consider that in our planning process. You can go to this planning dashboard and provide more information about that, as well as see what's going on in different areas around the state. How are we doing time-wise? All right. Just very quickly to wrap things up, my last thing I wanted to mention is the real-time network. There's a lot of slides with a lot of detail about this, but I don't know that many of you would use it. The very basic info here is that if you've ever needed super high accuracy GPS data, 2 to 5 centimeters, historically you would have to take a base station, set that up, do calibration and that kind of thing. What we're seeking to do here with the Montana State Reference Network is make that a subscription service that you can just tie into, very quick to get going and very quick to get high accuracy position information. A lot of details about that. You can see the coverage. We're working to fill in the southeast corner of the state, but we have pretty good coverage elsewhere around Montana, but we will be growing this network in the coming years. You can get a trial account to test it out free of cost. Academic users can get free access to the network. contributors, if you were to set up a station or provide some other value to the network, we can work on a contributor agreement that would be free of cost, but our standard user cost would be $1,500 a year for that. And our MTSRN coordinator is Kazi Arafutsman. Kazi is out of the office right now, but if you need anything, if you reach out to that mtsrn@mt.gov, I'll be covering that mailbox until he's back. So just let us know. So very quickly, takeaways. We're the coordinating body for MSDI GIS data here at the State Library. LiDAR from Montana is here. We want you to use it. Please use it in the work that you do if it's applicable. We're working on modernizing hydrography using the LiDAR, and then the state reference network is used for real-time high accuracy GPS positioning and benefits many partners. And again, a reminder that we have MSDI working groups and want to encourage you to participate in those. And here are the bios at the very end if you want to reach out to or get more information about Aaron, Troy, and Kazi. And there's their contact info. Thank you so much. I think that concludes what I have.
Great. Thank you, Evan. Appreciate that update. And just as a reminder to everybody, we've posted Evan's presentation, a PDF version of it, in the chat for everyone to see. And now we'll move on to Braden Burkholder, who is the Information Systems and Sciences lead for the Heritage Program. Braden, take it away.
Bryce, can you confirm that I'm sharing my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Great, thank you. All right, yeah, Bryce said, my name's Braden Burkholder. I want to start by acknowledging the other folks here in the Information Systems and Services. We've got Dave Ratz, our web program developer, Kyle Caskey, who is our biological data scientist, and Scott Bloom, our data wrangler. This team is just a great team to work with, and it's a big reason why we're able to accomplish so much with relatively few resources to bring great data sets to you. Speaking of those data sets, this is, as Bryce kind of introduced, our view of our information hierarchy of our tabular and spatial data as we view it here at NHP. Starting at the bottom, that taxonomy and L information is information about our species and habitats, mostly tabular information there. Structured surveys are our point surveys where points where surveys have occurred. We also have some non-point surveys in there as well. Observations are largely point information. Species occurrences are some polygonal data that are kind of those value added, enhanced based on a lot of observations and focused on species of concern in Montana. We've got our models and biodiversity layers, our ranges, and then our ranks. And on the right here, you can see the stats for where we're at in terms of numbers for those. And just to highlight a couple of key points here, for our ranges, there's a good bump there as we had a bunch of work done with contractors to improve a lot of our invertebrate ranges in this last year in coordination with our zoology staff. So that's part of the big bump there. In terms of models, Bryce already mentioned this, but we've now got vascular plants models out for use. And we're really excited to have all those and all of our vertebrate animals that we think we can model in both cases. It's the ones we can model, so it's not 100% of the species that are out there, but the ones we have valid models and data for. And then in terms of observations, there are many data sets that were brought in the last year. A big shout out to both Scott and Kyle for all the work that they did to bring those in. When a big chunk of that in the last year was bringing in a couple of years worth of eBird data that we had at a backlog. So that is kind of the big changes in our core data in the last year. Just a quick summary of the non-native species data that we have in our system now, as Bryce pointed out, that we've been managing for getting close to a decade. The key highlights here are that we did update about 47 weed species models in 2025. And that we're doing, Kyle is a couple of years ago, we reported on this. We're bringing in iNaturalist data on a monthly basis, and we now have over 17,000 non-native records that are have been brought in through that system. So it's definitely a nice data stream to have to be able to really inform the status of non-native species in Montana. So as Bryce also mentioned, we have a new website, and I'm going to kind of use it as a guide to point you to some of the new data and information tools and products that we have, starting with the Montana Field Guide. And in the field guide, we've got this new ecological communities field guide. This is largely based on the national vegetation classification groups, as well as some aquatic communities and other land cover. The important thing here is that this is tied into our new land cover layer that we have out. And so any links within that layer are going to come over to this new system that will have all sorts of information about these groups. Perhaps the most something that may be of interest to some folks is that in addition to our old setup where we had ecological systems, we had species connected to those ecological systems. So you could see which species are represented or commonly or occasionally occurring. We now have, in addition to that, some designations of diagnostic dominant and codominant plant species that are occurring in those vegetation classification groups. And so those are all available in those accounts that we have for those in the field guides there. So check those out. Another update to our field guide more broadly. In the very top here, you can see the advanced search button. In that advanced search, there are a number of options to be able to figure out, filter our field guide to specific groups of species or classifications of species. One thing, though, is that if you go in and filter, you might get a lot of results. For example, here's a search for carex. You get 142 different species that pop up. And so one thing we wanted to do and were able to accomplish in the last year is being able to put a spatial filter into the field guide. So now you can come in, put in a latitude and longitude, and then a buffer. And using that information in addition to other advanced search filters, you can now find a much smaller group of species within the field guide. And we're really excited to be able to have this as kind of a way to trim down potential species lists for folks to be able to use the field guide more efficiently. Within the individual accounts in the field guide, we're gonna touch here on some of our vertebrate species that we're now having new global ranges. These are ones that we've adapted from iNaturalist geomodels. This is an example of plain spadefoot. And we're adding these as we go along. We've got a bunch in there already. Here's one for big brown bat, another for northern rubber boa. And so those ranges are much more accurate than some of our older vector-based ranges that were put together in some cases decades and decades ago based on limited information. So these are in many cases much more modern. We're reviewing these and approving them on an individual species basis, but we're excited to be rolling these out. So keep an eye out for those in the field guide accounts, mostly for vertebrates at this point. One thing we can do with those new global ranges is we can actually track areas and how much of that global range is intersecting Montana. And so we got some new general statistics for a lot of our species at the bottom of our field guide accounts. In addition, we've also put in the breeding range in Montana for those species and the predicted area suitable habitat when we have habitat models. So those summaries are now available at the bottoms of our field guide accounts for a number of our vertebrates and some of our vascular plants. All right, jumping back out to our main web page here, I'm going to get into a couple of new dashboards and tools that we have. Most notably, as Bryce introduced in his introduction, at this new beaver restoration hub. Special thanks to Kyle and our partners at Fish, Wildlife and Parks, notably Tori Ritter, for all the work that was put into getting this data set and products out there. The what I really want to point you toward is and encourage you to dig into if you want to check out BRAT, our guides for efficient use. And this story map overview really gets in all the components of what BRAT is and how it functions, and gives you a really kind of quick way to become an expert like Tori and get it and start digging into BRAT. So the guides are just simple little tools to be able to show you what sort of navigation options and tools and data are presented in those dashboards. So they're very helpful. Another tool that I wanted to highlight, we've got our non-native watch list and Montana species invasives to watch story map that were put out this year. The watch list and based on iNaturalist data, and this dashboard has both graphical and spatial components to it, some charts and graphs, some tables that are shown. And so what this is showing is non-native species that have not yet made it to Montana, but are at our doorstep. And so you're able to go through, filter by species, filter by how many observations there are within this 800-kilometer radius that we've set up to capture what's coming closer to Montana. And then you can sort by the ones that are just how proximate they are to Montana. And this does include, just, again, based on iNaturalist data, and includes both information on plants and animals. So if you're dealing with any sort of invasive species in your work, make sure to check that out. Another product we put out this year was a story map developed with support from the DNRC and the Montana Invasive Species Council. This is just a kind of a nice little story map giving some species profiles, summarizing natural history, impacts, prevention, and other management resources for some key invasive species that are already here in Montana and the impacts that they're having. Another tool is a story map highlighting grazing boundary information. This was with support from Montana Grass Conservation Commission and the DNRC. And this is a tool that summarizes a bunch of district and allotment boundaries. Notably, we've got a map in here that shows all of the BLM Forest Service trust lands and FWA grazing allotment boundaries. And I think this is probably the first time that all those data sets have been brought together in one place. So if grazing impacts your work at all, this might be a great resource for you to have a better understanding of what the full landscape looks like in terms of where grazing is occurring on public lands. All right, one last new tool here under zoology and animals on our main web page. If you go into our wildlife bibliographies, we've completed major updates on the effects of recreation on wildlife. This was an effort that was first undertaken back in 1999. We've now got over 6,000 references cataloged in this bibliography. There are 1,500 of those that are new. You can use this tool to search by categories, keywords, free text searches of abstracts, and sort and search by dates as well. So a big shout out to Scott Bloom and all of his work getting this together, and Sherry Barron as well. This work was funded in large part by the Rocky Mountain Foundation and the Montana Wildlife Society. So kudos. And this is kind of a first step to redoing a project to bring some recommendations and best management practices to the front about how recreation can impact wildlife. So hopefully we'll be able to get that funded here and those resources out the door as well. All right, now I'm going to be jumping into how you can help us improve our data sets with your submissions, starting with our forms. We've got a bunch linked from this website, but I do want to highlight our Survey 123 forms. These are great tools, the Heritage Observation Collector and Rapid Weed Reporter, for reporting observations where you have 100% confidence in the ID of those species you're encountering in reporting. These tools allow for observations to be brought in nightly when they've been reported by qualified biologists. And these are kind of just two main forms. We've actually got over a dozen other forms for various survey protocols and data collection efforts. including this example of greater shorthorn lizard from 2025, where we partnered with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks to provide a form so that they could collect data from the public on greater shorthorn lizard observations. We saw over 100 come in this last year, and it was just a great effort, both with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, getting the word out through stickers and press releases, and to be able to have a survey in the background that it really gets at the meat of why we want to do these sorts of things to help our partners out, is that it allows us to centralize data much more efficiently and decreases the overall effort we have to invest to be able to import data later. So let us know if there's Survey 123 forms or opportunities that might be out there to help you collect data more efficiently and get data more efficiently to us. Bryce is going to touch a lot about the iNaturalist and report invasive species resources that we now have on our website over the lunch hour. But I just wanted to point out that this is where you want to go if you have observations where you're not 100% confident of the species ID, as opposed to our Survey 123 forms, where you should be confident in the IDs that you're submitting. So, and as I mentioned previously, like when if you're submitting these data to iNaturalist, like we are importing those on a monthly basis. So we'll get your data pretty quickly if you're using this type of data submission pipeline. And this is where we do encourage members of the public and non-agency folks to submit their observations as well. All right, so jumping into some kind of non-native work and products, I wanted to point out these resources that we now have, those 47 new plant models that we put out this year. You can access from the models part of our webpage, but also we've got this big report under presentations in the botany section on non-native species. And those have kind of some interpretive information about all the models that we have out, not just the new ones, but everything that we've produced for non-native species. In there is this listing of invasives in neighboring jurisdictions, in case you're curious about what other states and provinces have on their noxious weed lists. And then this slide is just a resource that you can look at later if you want to know where the sources of those data are. So another way you can really help us out and help Montana's natural resources is by signing up for some agency audit reports. In this example, we have an audit report that we send out to resource managers that are interested on new weed observations. And these incorporate all the data sets that come into the Natural Heritage Program, but notably at the bottom here, where there were 3 species that were detected using iNaturalist and then brought to the attention of data managers through these audit reports, and have allowed for some rapid response to species that are either newly in Montana or invading new areas in Montana. Non-native species aren't the only audit reports we have out there for our agency partners. We do have a number of other ones, and so reach out to us if you want to be kept up to date and in the loop on data that's coming into our system without having to go in and like dig into Map Viewer, for example. So if you want to know what, at the bottom example is new species of concern observations by FWE region. So in this case, new observations that were coming in every quarter to highlight for folks to know that, like, oh, yep, there's these new observations coming into our system. They don't have to go through and pick through Map Viewer to figure out what's new. So if you have an interest in any audit reports to help you in your work, just reach out to me. Some other reminders, as Bryce mentioned, we're happy to do training on any of the tools we have available. Just let us know. We do have a lot of videos now for various tools on YouTube and how to submit data or use Map Viewer. And an example here is there's this little playlist link on the main welcome splash screen to our Map Viewer application. And if you click on that, you can get into YouTube, and there's a bunch of videos in there showing you how to use Map Viewer most efficiently. If for some reason you're an agency partner and you don't have map viewer access yet, also reach out to us and we'll get you set up with that resource. Just let us know. If you prefer to use your own local GIS as opposed to digging into Map Viewer and using our tools on the website, we do have some spatial data web services that we've been promoting for a couple of years now. These are updated monthly and they include observations for species of concern, invasive species, all of our species of concern occurrence polygons. So those resources are available again for our agency partners to use, and just reach out to me. You do need an AGOL account to be able to access those resources. Finally, one last kind of tool I wanted to talk about was our biodiversity task in Map Viewer. This is a great tool for understanding where biodiversity hotspots are likely to occur on the landscape, which land ownerships contribute to biodiversity for various species groups, and which species are likely to be present within those areas. So take a look at this product if you're doing some large-scale planning. In addition to the native species that we have loaded in that tool, we do have this kind of cumulative invasion risk of state-listed noxious weeds that's in that same tool. And we just wanted to point out that we're happy to rescale these kind of heat maps to areas that may be of more interest to you. In this case, here's some example counties and how the results differ when you just look at things at a county scale as opposed to a statewide scale. And finally, just here's an example of how some of our models can be used, applied to planning efforts. We put this map together on woody invasives as part of a statewide management plan to show areas of higher or lower invasion risk for this group of species and how they overlap in Montana and where the hotspots really are going to be for where those species are going to be either establishing or expanding. So we're happy to use our tools and resources to be able to help you see new patterns in our data and our models. So just let us know if there's something we can do to help. And then I just wanted to give a quick overview here of our goals for 2026. We're going to be attempting to launch our new field guide and Amazon Web Services with a bunch of new formatting and features. Really looking forward to that. We'll be updating Map Viewer to modernize the code base and incorporate the new land cover and wetland and riparian layers into Map Viewer. That might actually happen here pretty quick here at the start of the new year. We're going to be continuing to work with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks on the State Wildlife Action Plan implementation tools. We'll be redoing our predictive habitat suitability modeling framework and also getting out some new biodiversity layers, adding some other features to our databases. And then it seems very likely that we'll be doing a pretty substantial transition of our data system to an AWS cloud environment. So we've got a busy year ahead of us here in 2026. And that's all I had for this presentation. So thank you very much. And I will turn it over.
Thanks, Braden. Much appreciated. And we'll turn the time over to Andrea Hip for an update from the Botany program. Andrea, you want to go ahead and share your screen?
I will do that. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay.
We can see your screen.
Okay. Hold on a second here. You're still seeing my screen?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Good morning. So I'm Andrea Pipp, the Botany Program Manager at the Montana Natural Heritage Program. And working with me is Kenda Herman, the Botany Data Assistant. Oh, hold on a second. And managing our botanical photographs in the field guide is our volunteer, Connie Geiger. And together we make up the Botany Program. The Botany Program is responsible for tracking the species, status, and distributions of exotic and native vascular plants, mosses, liverworts, hornworts, fungi, lichens, algae, cyanobacteria, and diatoms. And using published checklists and continuing to engage with taxonomic experts, the Montana Natural Heritage Program maintains the state checklists, centralizing the taxa in our database and displaying it on the Montana Field Guide. And today, the database is close to having full representation of botanical taxa. I like to show this graph because it demonstrates the number of observations and the types of species brought into the database from 2008 to 2025. And the breadth and the depth of our botany database has grown tremendously. And in 2025, it houses over 1.2 million botanical observations. So with this data, we have been tracking the status of vascular plants, mosses, and lichens. And looking at the vascular plants, the botany database is tracking more than 2,800 species, varieties, subspecies, and hybrids. About 415 taxa, or 14% of our vascular flora, are classified as species of concern, potential species of concern, or are globally rare. And many of them also have agency designations. Another 190 taxa, or 7% of the vascular flora, remain classified as status under review because their status is in question and it needs a review. The database now has more than 1.1 million vascular plant observations. However, we are still needing to bring in the large amount of credible plant specimen data that is managed by herbaria. This graph illustrates the number of vascular plant species, varieties, subspecies, and hybrids by their state rank. Exotic or non-native species account for over 500 taxa, or about 17% of the vascular plant flora. They are given the state rank of not applicable because the species are not of conservation concern. The purple box highlights 507 vascular taxa whose status is not ranked. And until their status gets reviewed, we don't know if they require special management. The red and orange boxes highlight the ranks given to 433 species of concern and potential species of concern that account for 15% of the vascular plant flora. So state ranks and the factors that go into the ranking need to be reviewed periodically to ensure that that information remains accurate and timely. And as all of you know, it is these state ranks that influence the species that are designated as being of conservation concern or require special management. Many, but not all of our species of concern and potential species of concern taxa are in need of a state rank review at this point. But my predecessor, Scott Mintzmoyer, is under contract and has started the process to review the existing state ranks for a subset of rare vascular plants. Looking at mosses, the botany database currently tracks 542 species, varieties, and subspecies, of which 2 are exotic. And of these, 70 taxa, or 12% of the moss flora, are classified as species of concern, potential species of concern, or are globally rare. Some also have agency designations. Another 65 taxa, or 12% of the moss flora, are in need of a status review. And as of 2021, the checklist has been updated. Although mosses are very undercollected, the database has almost 13,000 observations, which includes the best known credible data, with more data coming. This graph illustrates the number of moss species, varieties, and subspecies by their state rank. And for mosses, species of concern taxa are ranked as S1 or S2. Potential species of concern and globally rare mosses are ranked as historical, or their status is not ranked, and that is very problematic. Shown in the purple box, another 422 taxa, or 78% of the moss flora, have never been ranked. With good data in the database, the time is now to review and rank all 542 moss taxa. And this slide shows Abatina, one of the 5 mosses that now has a rank, a state rank reason, and the details you can find on the field guide. So once all of the moss taxa are ranked, then the goal is to gather experts and reevaluate what it means for a moss to be listed as a species of concern. Montana has 5 plants that are addressed under the Endangered Species Act. Water Howellia is delisted. Spalding's catchfly, whitebark pine, and Ute ladytresses are listed as threatened, and thickleaf bladderpod is petitioned for federal listing. Spalding's catchfly grows in mesic grasslands in northwest Montana. And in accordance with the 2007 recovery plan, I've been working with the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes to monitor plants on the Flathead Indian Reservation. Through a competitive Section 6 grant from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, I submitted a proposal which was awarded in August 2024 and finally approved this past September in 2025. So in 2026, I will be working with the CSKT botanist to implement a second round of 3 consecutive years of monitoring at 2 key conservation areas on the Flathead Indian Reservation. Water Huelia was delisted in 2021. Delisting of any species triggers implementation of a post-delisting monitoring plan. The first monitoring period was completed, and you can find that baseline report on our website. The second round of monitoring is scheduled for 2028. But if the grant process takes 1.5 years to complete, then I'm contemplating submitting a proposal in 2026. Ute ladies tresses grows in wet meadows in the valleys of southwest Montana, which is the region outlined in gray on the slide. In 2025, on January 7th, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service proposed to delist Ute ladies tresses from the Endangered Species Act. And as part of the public comment process, I submitted comments on the proposed delisting, as did my peers in other state natural heritage programs. As of today, Ute ladies tresses remains threatened. In Montana, the status of this orchid remains uncertain because populations are small, fragmented, and either face significant threats or have not been revisited for at least 12 years. Several years ago, I created a brochure as a way to approach private landowners and create awareness with hopes of acquiring current data. I made some progress, but COVID also interfered. And in 2026, I would like to redistribute the brochure, and I'm seeking your help in how best to connect with the agricultural and rangeland communities in this region. Last August, Larry Urban, the wetland mitigation specialist for the Department of Transportation, taught a field training on the identification and management of Ute ladies tresses. And some of you were there. It was had great participation from 6 federal and state agencies, Northwestern Energy, and 3 consulting firms. Folks learned how to identify the plant, and Larry spoke of MDT's annual monitoring and prescriptive management tactics that have promoted populations and includes mowing, livestock grazing, and modified weed control procedures. So under the executive order declaring a national energy emergency, Northwestern Energy proposed and prioritized a new pipeline, and the route intersected areas modeled by our program as predicted suitable habitat for Ute ladies tresses. So with consent from private landowners, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and myself, assisted Northwestern Energy and Montana Dakota's BLM to survey a portion of the pipeline identified as having potential habitat. The team did a thorough survey. We found no orchids. And while the BLM state botanist and myself normally recommend 3 consecutive years of surveys, the thorough on-the-ground search told us that that portion of the pipeline route was not suitable habitat for the orchid. But it was very productive group effort that provided useful data that our program will use to help refine the model, and it moves Northwest Energy forward in their project. Thickleaf bladderpod is a regional endemic that only grows in the Pryor Mountain Desert of south central Montana and adjacent Wyoming. It was petitioned for listing because of its limited distribution and an array of threats that could affect its persistence. The Wyoming Natural Diversity Database and the Montana Natural Heritage Program teamed up, and this past April, we finalized a regional status report, and you can find it on our website. The compilation of information allowed me to review the Montana state rank, and although the review retained an S2, S3 state rank, the information brought forth is more complete, timely, and transparent. and you can find the rank report on the Montana Field Guide. A competitive grant from the Montana Department of Agriculture is funding the review of provisional records for non-native plants. And this graph shows the number of provisional records, which are those green striped bars, in comparison to the accepted observations in the solid green bars. About 18% of our data sits as provisional until it can be reviewed. And Kenda Herman leads the task of conducting quality control to retain the credible and accurate data. And the work is ongoing. And in 2025, at least 50,000 observations have been reviewed and either accepted or removed. Last year, I announced the release of the Montana Native Plant Conservation Strategy. In 2025, a 7-member Strategy Stewards Committee held its first meeting in January. But given the challenging year, I put the next meeting on hold. Instead, I put my attention into publicizing the strategy. Presentations were given to the Plant Society and the Montana Library Network. Articles were written for the Plant Society's newsletter, including a consultant's commentary. A significant strategic goal was met in 2025 when Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks agreed to include plant species of greatest conservation need into the Montana SWAP revision. So I dedicated time to write and edit for the SWAP, and I'm proud to say that we all did it. 109 plant species of greatest conservation need are in the 2025 Montana SWAP. This year, I continued to participate in the national effort managed by the U.S. Forest Service to conduct lichen biomonitoring in Montana. And lichens are useful indicators of air quality, particularly the lichens growing in the trees and the shrubs, such as those dark brown lichens hanging down from the larch branches in this photo. Each lichen species differs in their sensitivity to any particular pollutant. So the protocol uses the entire community of lichens to assess the status, trends, effects, and sources of many regional pollutants. And this data is essential for wilderness managers who must determine if air quality standards are being met at each wilderness area. A major goal is to expand the network of certified lichen biomonitors in order to conduct revisits to established plots at least once every 10 years. Last August, I taught a certification training to 10 participants from the Bitterroot and Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest and our very own botany assistant. They spent 2 days learning how to differentiate macrolichens growing in the forest canopy, recording vegetation data, and collecting lichen tissue samples. They also had to pass a lichen collection test to qualify to carry out the protocol. I identified the lichens, and I am pleased to report that each person passed. The intent is for certified lichen collectors to implement the protocol on official plots located on their respective forest. In September, Kenda and I monitored one plot on the Gallatin National Forest, and funding for this project comes from Region 6 of the U.S. Forest Service and our own program. Looking ahead to 2026, my goals are to continue serving as a lichen specialist to help expand the monitoring, and as staff time and funding allow, conduct a refresher in the spring to the certified lichen collectors, have Kenda work independently to monitor plots, and I'm willing to lead another certification training to permanent and long-term employees on other national forests to expand the network of certified biomonitors. And I want to emphasize that this protocol is designed to train people who have no prior knowledge of lichens. Lichen biomonitoring data provides valuable information to the revisits provide important information to the National Forest Air Resource Management Program, and it benefits our program because the lichen observation data facilitates lichen ranking, range mapping, and predicted suitable habitat models. The Montana Native Plant Society and the Montana Natural Heritage Program have been jointly developing a plant-based citizen science effort called the Montana Citizen Botany Program. And the pilot study was successful. So in 2025, we began phase 3. The objectives are to establish a citizen botany coordinator position that is separate from the natural heritage botanist position to make the workload more sustainable, to explore how citizen botanists can assist in identifying native plant seed sources and seed collection, to continue to revisit rare plant occurrences, to host group field-based revisits and seed collecting activities, to investigate financial planning. And phase 3 is funded by the Montana Native Plant Society, Montana Department of Agriculture, Montana Dakota's BLM, and the U.S. Forest Service, Region 1. And I'm very happy to announce that through Montana Ag Corps, we have an AmeriCorps member, Grace, who will serve as the coordinator to help develop roles and responsibilities. And she'll be collaborating and joining the botany program in January for an 11-month position. In 2025, I created or updated the profiles of 10 vascular plants on the Montana Field Guide. The task focused on noxious and invasive species, but where there are native lookalikes, you will find specific updates on those respective profiles. Funding came from Region 1 of the U.S. Forest Service. And for the first time, profiles on biological control agents got created. 6 insects and 1 fungus brought over for biocontrol on non-native thistles now have profiles that detail their status, identification, habitat, life cycle, and much more. And on the field guide, I am linking plant and biocontrol species profiles. So as an example, the left profile is for the exotic plant Canada thistle. Scroll down to the biological control section and you will find hyperlinked the biological control agents. Click on thistle seed head weevil and that takes you to the insects profile. Scroll down in the thistle seed head weevil profile and you will find the plant species are hyperlinked. And I think my process is to insert links on the first mention of the plant, insect, or fungus in the other organism's profile. And this to me avoids a profile with too many links that could distract from the reader. I also want the photographs to crosswalk to show the interaction between organisms. So for example, the Canada thistle profile includes a photo that shows the type of damage caused by thistle tortoise beetle. Likewise, on the thistle tortoise beetle profile, you'll find pictures of the insect feasting on Canada thistle. So if anyone has photographs taken in Montana where the species are verified and the photos can be posted on the field guide, please reach out to me. And as always, I welcome anyone's review, suggestions, and corrections regarding grammar, content, accuracy, format, whatever, on these profiles for the botany and biocontrol profiles. As identified in the plant strategy, Montana-derived native plant materials like ecotype seed, bare root, and containerized stock are in short supply to meet agency and private sector needs for restoration, reclamation, and landscaping projects. The Montana DNRC Nursery and the Montana Native Seed Network are the state lead for supplying native plant materials. And in the chat is an update from the Montana Native Seed Network. If someone could put that in there for me. The U.S. Forest Service and the BLM have very active native seed collecting programs. And there's also a growing need to preserve genetics of global and state rare plants. But Montana lacks facilities for long-term seed storage. So I would like to hear from the federal and state agencies regarding your interest in banking rare plant seed. This would require developing an agreement, such as with the Ray Selling Berry Seed Bank, and some heavy cost sharing. And lastly, you are all invited to the Montana Native Plant Conservation Conference on April 14th to the 15th, 2026 at the University of Montana. We'll explore plants, fire, and conservation and discuss vascular plant ranking, SOC listing, and digital data collection. Details are coming soon to the Native Plant Society's website. And this ends my presentation. So I thank you very much for listening. And I also have something to add to the chat for the conference as well.
I just added that, Andrea, so it's in there for everybody, as well as the native plant or the native seed network update. Thanks for that update from Botany, Andrea. And now we'll move on to zoology and get an update from Dan Bakken. We can see your screen, Dan.
And hopefully you can see me now.
Yep.
So hi, I'm Dan Bakken. I'm the senior zoologist for the Natural Heritage Program. Our other zoological staff are Alexis McEwen. She focuses mostly on acoustic bat data management and analysis, but also helps out with a number of other projects. Bo Crees is our avian specialist, and he's in a shared position with Montana Audubon in the Natural Heritage Program. All right, so I'd like to start the presentation off just giving an idea of what species our part of the program is responsible for. The focus of our program, as Bryce showed in the history, has typically been vertebrate species and vertebrate species of conservation concern. And that focus has expanded over the years. And we have quite a few species that we need to get data on and manage data for. We have about 650 vertebrates, give or take. Those are fish, birds, mammals, reptiles, and amphibians. But we have quite a few more species within the state than just vertebrates. You can see that the bulk of our species are actually invertebrates. And while we have a good handle on about how many mollusks we have and a few other groups, there's significant uncertainty about even the number of species within the state, certainly taxonomic uncertainty, and also just a general lack of data for these species. And although these aren't typically the species that folks are managing directly, they're an important part of our ecosystem, and oftentimes they support some of our vertebrate species of conservation concern, or plants, or just general ecosystem functions. So it's important to get data on those species as well. And recently, over the past year, we've been putting effort into getting more data, specifically focusing on species that are a higher priority for us. And we don't have dedicated invertebrate expertise on staff. So we've partnered with some experts to get these data. Folks like Dave Stagliano of the Montana Biological Survey has helped us get data on 500 aquatic invertebrates. Marion Lyman, the state's moth guru, has helped with 300 moths. And then we've also partnered with the Xerces Society to get data on all of our native bumblebee species. Those are species in the genus Bombus. And they've helped us assess taxonomic validity of the current species list that we had, and added additional species, helped us with aggregating and getting occurrence data into our databases, delineating range polygons, vetting our predicted habitat suitability models, coming up with some threats that these species face, and in some cases determining if there are significant host-plant relationships and what species are related to what, similar to what Andrea described in her presentation for the biocontrol species. And all this has allowed us to undertake status rank assessments. And I completed those rank assessments for the bumblebees, the Bombus genus. So those are complete and available on the field guide if any folks are interested. And we're targeting the completion of these other groups that I talked about, as well as butterflies, over the next few years, to try to get good data on pollinators and some of these more visible species, so we can move on to other species as well. And one thing I'd like folks to kind of keep in the back of their mind, if they see a need or they use data on, say, pollinators and host plants, I'd be curious how you use those data and how you'd like to ingest it, because that's on our list to more fully develop that capacity. I'm going to jump ahead to just a handful of projects that we've worked on with partners over the last year. This is by no means a comprehensive list. These are just ones that I thought would be of general interest to the group. We're about in year 2 of a 3-year effort with the Fish and Wildlife Service and BLM to look for northern myotis across eastern Montana and really help define a solid range polygon for the species. We did a bunch of work in the Yellowstone and in north central Montana. Fortunately, we didn't have any captures of the species. However, we did catch one bat that released itself prior to being able to be measured and collect genetic information to confirm that capture. And that was about 8 miles out of range, close to Glendive on the Yellowstone River. So it's likely that we could, or that we probably will expand at least in that area, and we'll see in the other areas that we're going to look next summer. We're continuing with this NA-BAT project. That's a collaborative project led by FWP in collaboration with a whole bunch of state and federal folks to gather bat acoustic data. This year we did 95 cells in approximately 375 sites across the state. And we're currently getting those data into our databases and looking at that. But I wanted to note, after a long and probably longer than it needed to be struggle with the national NA-BAT uploading portal, we've finally pushed all of the previous year's data for this project. So those data from 2020 to 2024 are now available through that portal as well. And finally, we're working on a project right now with the Department of Military Affairs on analyzing some of their acoustic data that they've collected on military lands in the Helena area. And in particular, it's not just bat data, it's also bird data focused mostly on detection of pinyon jay, but we're also interested in other species of concern. And I wanted to highlight this in particular because this project's allowing us to develop the capacity to analyze acoustic bird data, which is becoming an increasingly effective tool for bird monitoring across the state. Now, I'm going to dive back into more of our data-related achievements for the year. So we try to maintain accurate taxonomy for all of our species, and that includes maintaining current common and scientific names. We use the American Ornithological Society list for birds, and over the last year they split warbling vireo into its western and eastern parts. So we now have western warbling vireos in the state. They also updated the genus for 2 of the birds previously in the accipiter genus, that's Cooper's hawk and American goshawk. They're now in the Astur genus. We had some name changes for mammals: Hayden shrew to prairie shrew, water vole to North American water vole, and some fish species changed. Mountain sucker is now plain sucker, which is slightly confusing. We also saw that cutthroat trout was split into multiple species. We now have Rocky Mountain cutthroat trout and West Slope cutthroat trout as separate, distinct species. We also maintain lists of status that our federal and state partners determine. So in terms of federal status updates, there's not really much to report. This is the same slide I showed last year. We still have several species of pollinator that have their status currently under review, as well as 2 bat species that are currently under review. On the state side of that, we don't have any change in our vertebrate conservation status rankings, but through that previously mentioned effort to rank Bombus, we now have 4 bumblebee species that are on our species of concern list. You can see their S ranks to the right, as well as 1 that qualified for the potential species of concern list. And if you're interested in those assessments, they're available on the field guide. Also, we're working or have ingested the current SGCN, that's Species of Greatest Conservation Need list that came out of the State Wildlife Action Plan process. So that should be available in our tools. Now, one of the big projects for the year, not only where we're providing a lot of data and expertise to support SWAP development. But part of that ended up being completing the review of all of our vertebrate status rankings, and then getting those data out to folks through the field guide. So as of now, vertebrates are done. If you go to the field guide, you should be able to see that cool slider bar graphic breaking down not only the status rank, the S rank, but also the components of that. And if you want to dig in a little bit deeper, you can click on that green text, that hyperlink down below that, and that'll bring you to a detailed report on that species with the individual components going into that rank, which I think are incredibly valuable for understanding conservation status. We are planning to rank moths and aquatic invertebrates as well, as I mentioned previously. And one other effort, after the swap goes out, they had a significant effort to have panels of experts review the threats, or what threats to include for what species within the swap. And I'm planning to integrate those threats with our assessments to make sure that we're in line and we have the best threat data for each species possible. And if you're curious, not only about individual threat ranks for species, but how those assessments compare across species, we now have this conservation status rank factor dashboard that was previously mentioned. This allows you to look at the components of rarity, the components of trends, components of threats, and also some interactions between these groups, not just on the individual species level, but by different taxonomic groups or status, or kind of any way you want to slice and dice it. And I think that can be valuable because you can look and see common trends, and you can also see species that stick out. And that's helpful for us on a QA/QC level, because we can figure out, hey, maybe we need to check this, or maybe the species is truly unique. To give you an idea of what these look like, I don't have time to run through every single category, but I'll just do threats right now because it's good representation. You can see up here, we have all of our different taxonomic groups represented by different colors. We have the various threats associated with species within those groups. So you can look and see, climate change and severe weather is one of our most common threats across all these groups. Might be because it's easy to assess because there's a lot of models out there, but it also represents a significant threat to these species. You can then filter by species of concern, by swap status, by global rank, and by state rank. So pretty handy if you want to explore the data. I'll also highlight this other category where we look at multiple rank factor categories together. And if you look on the left side, we can show threat impact versus short-term trends. So how high the threats are for a species, whether it's declining or increasing, you should see, probably some relationship there. But if, say, you're interested in species that have very high threats, but we don't have any trend data because they're not monitored, you could go down on the bottom, click that, that'll bring up a species list. It's kind of cool to see all the birds have active work being done on them, which will in part address, this lack of trend data. And then you can export the list and do what you want with the data. So I think it's a cool tool if you're curious about these interactions. Now moving on to from projects that we've completed to work we're doing now. We're putting some effort into assessing the adaptive capacity of species. That's defined as the capacity of a species to adapt either in place or to move to find suitable habitat when there's broad-scale habitat change. This is based on an effort by NatureServe and USGS to develop these criteria. And that's focused on climate change, but if you dig into the mechanics of how this assessment works, it actually serves as a pretty good way of thinking about any sort of broad-scale habitat change. And this assessment takes into account things like distribution and kind of the spatial aspects of a species, its life history and ecology. And really, I think that there's potential to start thinking about other broad-scale threats to species and apply this to them. And most importantly, because like our conservation status effort, this breaks this metric down into these individual pieces, you can go in and look at what's driving that. And that might give folks insight into how to either prevent declines or support species within these areas that are impacted. We're anticipating being able to get through the vertebrate list sometime in 2026, although that's, this is an ongoing project, so that may be subject to change. And to give everybody an idea of the products that we're expecting to produce for this is a mock-up of something we could throw on the field guide. So we'd have an adaptive capacity section, placed where appropriate within the field guide. You have similar slider bars to the conservation status, breaking down each of the categories. You have an overall summary of the species adaptive capacity shown on the right, and then a hyperlink to a full report. That full report, again, very similar to our conservation status, will show the assessment categories that go into each kind of more broad category, as well as the text justifying why we scored it how we did. And this is also pretty cool because if you're interested in something like lifespan, generation time, aspects of the species ecology or natural history, you can find that information within that too. And then finally, at the end of the report, we'll do a summary and then provide an appendix defining all these different categories. So moving on from projects that we're implementing to projects that we'd like to implement, going through a lot of these data, thinking critically about threats, about predictive modeling, various spatial aspects of the species, it struck us that, we have now pretty good threat data for at least our vertebrate species. But these threats often have this spatial component. They're not evenly distributed across the landscape. You can see here on the right, this is a map showing the predicted change in temperature and precipitation over the next 20 years, with warm colors showing areas that will have or are predicted to have a higher degree of change than the green areas, which are predicted to have lower. So if we are interested in what areas of species core habitat are changing, we can intersect our predicted habitat models with spatially explicit layers like this, and we can kind of see where species might not be doing so well into the future. You can see here, this is for American pika. There's some areas around Missoula and in Southwest Montana that are predicted to have greater change than, say, the Beartooths or Glacier National Park. So thinking along these lines, climate data or climate models aren't the only type of models that have these types of data. We can get fire risk assessments. We can look at habitat conversion to agriculture and a number of other threats. So we're interested to explore producing reports for species that highlight areas where these threats might be operational and more severe within the species range within the state. And to wrap things up, thinking about all these tools that we're developing, we have the field guide with a lot of natural history information. We have these predicted habitat suitability models. We have conservation status ranks, and all the data that goes into that, as well as the forthcoming adaptive capacity work and spatial threats work. These all relate to the conservation of species. So we're thinking it might be pretty handy to have this all in one place, to take all this data and put it into one report. These assessments and resources share a lot of the same data. So it might be good for folks to be able to just dig in and get a single source for, essentially what should describe the conservation of the species within the state. And Bryce has a question after this within the polls he's going to show that you can provide more feedback on this. So with that, I don't believe we have any time for questions. So feel free to drop any in the chat and give me a call or shoot me an email. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that presentation. Um, yeah, so folks, the next 15 minutes is scheduled for questions, and I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll that we have put together. Um, and we'd appreciate your feedback. Some of these are longer inputs, so I'm going to just leave them open and also invite people to ask questions directly to any presenter from this morning, whether it's my presentation, introductory presentation, Evan's presentation on library digital resources, or Braden, Dan, and Andrea's presentations for zoology, botany, and information services. Any questions or comments on what was presented or visions for some of those future products, whether it's adaptive capacity or, again, we've got a question in the poll, but we'd appreciate any verbal feedback as well on would it be good to roll all those reports together, or what are your thoughts? Again, we're just going to open up the floor. It might be good if you raised your hand, but uh, just go ahead and blurt it out if you've got something. And we really do appreciate the feedback in the polls. Mike Hamill, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I got a question for Andrea. Excuse me. And that's just in reference to with the invertebrates and the zoological organisms, they have a standardized database for scientific names. I was wondering if that is the same for the plant species as well. Thanks.
Great question. Thanks, Michael. So for plants, I think a good standard is the Flora of North America. But in Montana, I tend to lean towards Peter Lessica's book on the Manual of Montana Vascular Plants, and that's because somebody could take that scientific name and actually use the key, to help with their identification. But there's the Flora of the Pacific Northwest, that the second edition, that has kind of done the best of what Flora of North America has done, but updated some stuff, and also has a really handy key and is very relevant to Montana. And so I have found it very difficult to have one standardized list to follow for the primary name. And but right now our website, our primary names are they need to be like, we need to review all of them because we're not consistent at all right now, and we could be more consistent moving forward. But we're at least trying to put stuff into alternative names. So hopefully you can search on the field guide. But yeah, I welcome any suggestions you have to help make it easier for people to understand the names of plants.
That's perfect. Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, I know it's a pain in the butt with the plant scientific names because everybody's either using new, old, or some sort of different name. So it's great that you have all the synonyms on the site as well. So
Yeah,
thanks.
thank you.
Other questions for one of our presenters from the morning? And again, thank you so much for helping us filling out these polls and helping guide us. We really appreciate the feedback. A lot of the information products that we've created over the years are a result of our partners' feedback on things that will help them in their processes. So really appreciate your feedback. Questions or comments from anybody else verbally? Again, thank you for continuing to fill out those polls. Looks like we still got activity there. Anybody have any questions or comments you want to say to the group on any of the questions asked?
Hey, hey Bryce, this is Tabitha. How are
Hey,
y'all doing?
Tabitha.
This is maybe just a general question, but
Yep.
one of the things that we recently learned from some diet meta barcoding data was we detected a bunch of invasive species with that that weren't previously recorded in those locations. And I just don't know if you guys have thought, so these were, plants. And of course, the location's not going to be super accurate, but because it's, the animals move around that are eating those things.
Mhm.
But I just wondered if you guys had thought about how to, or whether to include things like that into um, the the field guide.
Yeah, I think, well, from a data source standpoint, I think eDNA will be a growing data source for us. And I also think that camera trap data is going to be a growing data source for us. Um, and we'll have some discussion of some camera trap efforts this afternoon in the partner feedback session. Um, in terms of how do we use it, essentially, when we get data sources in that potentially have wide locational uncertainties associated with them, what we do is we look at, do we have representational data in the database for the time period that data was gathered? And this typically is not so much, well, actually, there are some modern examples, but for instance, if we go back further in time, sometimes it's more important for us to have records to fill a regional hole in Montana, for instance. And so typically, I think, further back in time you go, the less precisely things were mapped, and the fewer data there was. So, but in more modern data, if we have essentially, let's say we've got three records in a county for a species, and one is mapped at the entire county level, and the other two are mapped precisely, we're just going to keep the ones that are mapped precisely. Does that make sense? Spatial representation, temporal representation is what we're shooting for in our data system.
Yeah, sure. In this case, I think it's I mean, again, like we just got this, or I
Mhm.
would have followed up, but it's sort of an expansion of the, as far as I can tell, or there's very limited points about for the common buckthorn up near the park. So
Yeah. Yeah. So in your
I'll share.
example for invasives, if we've got a lot of mapping of that particular invasive, we probably would not integrate that data just because of the larger locational uncertainty associated with it.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Any other verbal feedback or questions on things? Um, Tabitha's question brings to mind for me a comment that I just want to put out there in general for everybody, and that is we want to make sure that we've got every data source represented that we possibly can. And so if you see something that we don't have, please make us aware of it. And so we can put it on our list of to-do items to integrate that information. Um, and essentially what we're trying to do is give species and habitats a voice in any environmental review permitting planning process. So if you've got data sets that are, near and dear to your heart, definitely get them to us. So, okay, last call for any comments. We got a couple minutes left, but we can also go ahead and move on to the next presentation.
I guess I have a question, Bryce,
Yeah.
and apologies if this was covered at some point, but I'm curious if or how much coordination between heritage programs there is as far as
Mhm.
resources offered in Montana that may also be offered in other states or other kind of cross programming that exists or might exist in the future?
Yeah, so I can say that we have some initiatives ongoing right now. For the last few years, we have been having monthly program coordinator calls of all the heritage programs in the Western US. We just recently have added the Canadian programs to those calls. So that's taking place monthly. And we had a coordination meeting in Colorado this fall across all the heritage programs in the West and agreed that we should do that same sort of monthly/quarterly. It's kind of up to the group, but for the individual disciplines. So now we have meetings on the books for all of the ecologists at heritage programs in the West to get together, all of the botanists, all of the zoologists, and also all of the data managers. And that's important also, from one standpoint, just for coordination, but we're also trying to steal and implement ideas from one another. So as an example, we've helped the Wyoming program launch their field guide, and they have invertebrate expertise that we have made use of that has really helped move us forward. So that's the kind of thing that is ongoing. And another example would be Kyle Caskey in our program has developed some Python workflows to automate incorporation of iNaturalist data into our data system, and then we've shared that with other programs. So that's the kind of thing that's ongoing. But we're housed in different environments and have different levels of funding and different levels of staffing. So we're not all going to be the same, but we're trying to coordinate as much as possible, and we're improving on that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. And I that totally makes sense. And I guess that just to add on to that, I was wondering if there's any effort to sort of standardize the way when possible, to kind of standardize the way information is presented. That seems very hard. And I think, that's something that we think a lot about as we work across state boundaries and that kind of thing.
Agreed. Yep. I would especially say that the funding that various programs have for web projects managers, web programmers, that differs a lot. And so we were very fortunate that we made a decision as a program dating back to the early 2000s, and we said it is essential that we make our information resources available on our websites to the greatest extent possible, and that we fund a web programmer position. And we are exceedingly lucky to have Dave Ratz, who we call Ratz, as our web projects manager.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, Bryce.
Yep. There's going to be another question session here, but we better move on to keep things on schedule to our land cover and spatial analysis lab updates. And so I am going to share my screen here. I'll start and I'll co-present this with Jessica Mitchell. And just give me just a sec here. So you should be seeing my screen. Someone yell at me if that's not the case.
You're good to go, Brent.
In addition to Jessica Mitchell with the Spatial Analysis Lab, I wanted to point out that this movement that we've had over the last year and a half or so to develop national vegetation classification system mapping in Montana and make that the basis of the new Montana land cover layer has really relied on the expertise of Scott Mintzmoyer with LXM Consulting and the GIS and data skills of Claudine Tobalski who works at both the Spatial Analysis Lab and the O'Connor Center for the Rocky Mountain West. So yes, this is an exciting time because we are moving into a new land cover era in terms of the mapping of it being based on the National Vegetation Classification System. And just background for this, This is a new national standard. The old ecological systems mapping is not going to be updated. And we have a partnership of federal and non-federal entities that are interested in maintaining this NVC mapping moving forward. And so there is wall-to-wall coverage in the lower 48 now for this NVC mapping. It's based on the Landfire product. And it's also moving into Canada. So that's also another exciting thing, is to have North America-wide coverage. And they're going to start with the grassland parklands, and then it'll move up into the boreal forest in terms of coverage in Canada. The other really exciting thing about this is that we can assign global and subnational conservation status ranks, because these NVC groups have those conservation status ranks assigned. The ecological systems did not. So in this image on this screen on the upper left is a kind of the NVC hierarchy. Again, this falls underneath the International Vegetation Classification Scheme, so that gives us the validity of assigning these global ranks. And I just want to point out in that red box that we are mapping the new land cover at the group level. And in terms of your thinking about it, if you're used to using the ecological systems mapping in the past, many of those ecological systems mapped over to groups fairly directly. Some of them were more associated with alliances, and so we had to kind of do some pigeonholing there. But in terms of total numbers, there are 66 groups, vegetation community groups, and 176 alliances and 626 associations. In terms of the mapping of the alliances and the associations, if we have particular alliances or associations that we think are of conservation concern moving forward, we'll map those as polygons, and we'll share those through our environmental summary reports. Right now, there's no mapping for those, with the exception of we can probably crosswalk some fins fairly quickly, and some of the wetland information fairly quickly. We have posted on our website this new how we've applied the NVC standard in Montana at that link. And Braden, if you wouldn't mind throwing that into the chat as well. And at that link, you can download this hierarchy spreadsheet so that you can wrap your head around this. And I've got this box at the bottom just saying, kind of highlighting the resources there. There's an introduction page that essentially copies what's on the website. There's this hierarchical list, which is what is shown on screen right now. There's a flat table to make sorting, filtering a little bit easier. And then there's a final spreadsheet that crosswalks ecological systems with the groups. In terms of which ones are popping out as, again, this is the exciting part. We were in the past with mapping of ecological systems, we didn't have a conservation rank associated with them, and now we do. So these are the NVC groups that are popping out that are either at the global G1, G2, G3, or at the state rank of S1, S2, S3 that I'm highlighting here on the screen. And I think what I want to point out is that, this is a great way of highlighting some of our grasslands that are of conservation concern that are globally important. The other thing that I want to say is if you crosswalk this with the new State Wildlife Action Plan and the habitats of greatest conservation need, all of these that you're seeing on screen are habitats of greatest conservation need in the SWAP. And all of the wetland and riparian groups are habitats of greatest conservation need. So in the SWAP, the habitats of greatest conservation need list is longer than this list. Also want to note that as part of the SWAP, we have helped, or Fish Wildlife Parks has helped us develop this new aquatic community classification and mapping. And this is something that Dave Stagliano, who is now out on his own as a consultant, but used to work at the Montana Natural Heritage Program as our aquatic ecologist. This was a vision of his that he had long ago. He's still helping us get this out the door. But essentially what we're doing is we're breaking down stream habitats across the state in these 4 ecoregions that are shown on the map: Northern Rockies, Middle Rockies, glaciated plains, Northern Great Plains. Then the flowing waters in those ecoregions are broken down by stream size: large, middle-sized, and small, and also stream flow on those small ones, whether they're intermittent or permanent. And then separately, there's lakes and reservoirs. And these are going to be the aquatic habitats of greatest conservation need in the upcoming swap. We're still developing these, but we're getting pretty close to having. You can look at the draft accounts on the new community field guide, and in the coming year we'll have a spatial product associated with them, and species that are associated with them. So that's all exciting. And now I'm going to just take you on a web tour, and take you through some, again, resources associated with land cover here. And the first one I want to go to on our new website is our, if you look over on the left side, you'll see resources. And if we go to ecology and application of National Vegetation Classification Standard under the land cover and vegetation community mapping. This again gives you the nitty-gritty details on how we've applied these NVC group maps, and also associated websites that give you background on the NVC in the US and how it's being applied. At the top is that NVC hierarchy download that I talked about. Also under resources and ecology, if we go back to that, this Montana land cover information link here will link you over to the land use land cover framework. This is the Montana Spatial Data Framework theme, and we've revised this website. And I'm going to leave some of this to Jessica, but what I want to note is the new land cover data that is NVC based can be downloaded now on the statewide GIS data list. And we have retired the old field guide that described the ecological systems, and we've retired the old ecological systems, but you can still download that. So I want to just point out in this archive section, if you want to work with the old ecological systems, they're still there. They're posted on the GIS data list. And right here, archive field guide accounts for ecological systems. That's how we're going to be sharing the descriptions of that, those previous land cover types. In terms of we'll go back to our homepage and go to our Montana field guide. And just want to note the ecological systems guide is now turned off. It is still running in the background because we have not transitioned our Map Viewer web application over to the new NVC-based land cover yet. We're just, hopefully a couple of weeks away from doing that. We'll send out an announcement to everyone on that. But here is the new Ecological Communities Guide. And I just want to give you an example. So if you're used to using the Ecological Communities Guide, then the feel will be very similar with this NVC-based guide. I wanted to note that the open water that I just discussed that's in the swap is going to be, all of those are going to be under this open water section. And let's just look at a shrubland example to give us some feel. We'll do mountain mahogany, woodland, and shrubland. So photos of the community, its rank. We are going to add the HGCN, the Habitat of Greatest Conservation Need designation from the swap to the right of the image here. Very exciting that we have this new ranking display here showing you both where we think this NVC group sits for rarity, threats, and trends, but also our certainty in those ranks. And you can download a full conservation status report. General description, diagnostic characteristics, range in the state, the density of that habitat. This is actually one of the best ways to look at densities of these various habitats is these summarized maps on the field guide. Very hard to do that in the GIS and pull out 30-meter pixels in the GIS to look at density. So these maps are great for looking at where is this habitat most densely based or least in the state. The general environment, vegetation, A little summary on the NVC hierarchy. Again, another place to download that full hierarchy that we discussed earlier. Dynamic processes, management, restoration considerations, a crosswalk with species of concern, so you can link over to individual species of concern that are associated with this habitat type. Here's that diagnostic and dominant or codominant plant species for this community. If we have a model for this, for these individuals, we'll provide a link to that as well to our modeling page. And I want to end up, before I go to Jessica here, I want to say our vision is to take and create, Dan showed you this conservation status summary for species dashboard. We want to create a similar dashboard in the coming year for habitats and summarize in the very similar way the rarity, threats, and trends of habitats in the state. Some of you may be familiar that NLCD, the National Land Cover Dataset, there's 30 years / 40 years of data now that's available there. And we are going to incorporate this tool, which is a USGS tool. Just want to demonstrate it really quickly. So we'll pick Montana and Lewis and Clark County here. And we're summarizing land cover change between 1985 and 2024 with this tool. And so you get a map of where has land cover changed over that time period. And then you can look at what has changed, what has increased, what has decreased. And then as an example for, say, forest, we can look at if we've lost forest, what has it gone to? So in this case, 64 square miles of forest has been lost over that time period that has gone to grassland, and 255 square miles has gone to shrubland. So encourage you to use this tool. I have spoken with the USGS folks about this, and they are looking at taking this and doing things beyond county. But we have the statistics, nationwide statistics, and so we can provide statewide summaries in this upcoming dashboard. And with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Jessica. And Jessica, I will reshare my screen here for you, or the PowerPoint.
Do you mind if I share my screen instead, Bryce?
Oh, sure, certainly, go for it.
Okay, thanks. Let's see if I can do that. You seeing a screen?
We're seeing it right now.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Jessica Mitchell, Spatial Analysis Lab. Our lab has worked with land cover since about with me personally, 2018. Some things to add that are noteworthy regarding the archive data set. That is the 2023 framework, which if you scroll down to the bottom of the State Library land cover homepage, you'll find here as an archive. And then, as Bryce mentioned too, the field data, that guide that was connected with that, is available as a PDF if you wanted to refer back to it. What's noteworthy probably here is that both the NVC that Bryce presented and the 2023 framework that's based on ecological systems is really mapping and revisions at the state level to 2016 Landsat imagery. And so what you're finding different are the classification systems, and the revisions on that 2023 framework. If there was a misclassification that was screened and flagged, it's relying probably on potential vegetation, whereas the NVC is, if there's any difference, it's probably on the potential versus existing vegetation. I'll jump over to a few updates on projects we have going on in the lab. We have wrapped up a 4th season of field data collection that has focused on invasive annual grasses across the state. We've surveyed roughly 2,300 acres of presence and absence, and we've combined that with heritage program data and maps, information, et cetera, to develop some map products. And really that has been dependent on our partners and the type of mapping products that are of interest. I'll move over, for example, to an interactive online map we've built and just kind of visit some of the locations here we've worked on. This is work going on with Missoula County and the data that we've collected there. That's been combined with an Inhabit, which is USGS suitability model, to come up with 4 different risk categories. This is for Ventonata specifically, a high invasion risk, what we're seeing as invaded, what we're seeing as low risk, and then areas where there's confusion that's existing between what we're detecting in imagery and what's in our suitability model from USGS. Another example would be some surveys we've collected over the past couple of years with the National Bison Range. That's being combined with USGS surveys that were conducted over the past 2 field seasons to get at pretty detailed weekly mapping of percent cover. And that's for both cheatgrass and Ventonata, and beginning to combine that with bison telemetry data. And then to jump back over to the Missoula County example, some of the layers that can be combined here for conservation planning purposes, can include some habitat distributions and even focal areas from SWOT parcel data, and that is intended to get at conservation planning and prioritizing treatment areas. Another project that we are working with in coordination with Region 1 of the Forest Service is an idea of calculating a likelihood of a management action introducing an invasive species. Some of the management actions are listed here on the left, and that is directly mapped to risk events. And then we're also taking into account properties for, I think, about 15 individual species and their particular characteristics with respect to dispersal, production, viability, and where we're ending up with this is an interactive tool where you can put in an area and upload your area of interest, and then the activities that you're anticipating conducting. And then there's an output that is a high, medium, and low risk with a report that's generated, the numbers behind those 3 different categories. Additional activities we have going on right now include work with the drone office or the Autonomous Aerial Systems Office, mapping rush skeleton weed for Department of Transportation. They have some other species of interest, such as Scotch brome, where we're going to try to do some precision mapping, and the longer term vision is targeted treatments, along roadside easements. I want to back up to this slide and just add here where we're ending up and work with the Forest Service is the generation of a webinar and some training down the road. So I'll see that gets out. You can look as this information becomes available on our website that's listed right here. Now I'll end with any additional questions that are out there on land cover.
And Jessica, let's go ahead and go to Kay and do and have her do wetland riparian mapping update from the O'Connor Center, and then we'll just do a group question.
Sounds good.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Jessica. Kay, are you ready to share?
I am. Just give me 1 second.
And Kay, a reminder to send me a copy, and I'll put it in the chat for you at some point.
I think Jessica has to stop sharing first. Okay, great.
We can see your screen.
Great. Just one sec. All right. Great. Thanks so much. And like Bryce said, my name is Kay, and also we're going to have some contributions from our wetlands ecologist, Jennifer Jones, today. And Bryce mentioned this earlier, but just wanted to share the most up-to-date wetland and riparian mapping status for NWI mapping in the state of Montana. And if you look at this map, all the red and green quads are up-to-date modern mapping. The blue is out of date. And like Bryce mentioned, we did do about 15 quads up in northeastern Montana this year. And Heritage Program funded that, so we really appreciate that. And we will keep chipping away at all of these blue quads in the coming years, hopefully. And then wanted to share some updates on the monitoring work that the O'Connor Center has been doing throughout the state. The biggest projects that we've been working on in the last several years are partnering with the Bureau of Land Management on their assessment, inventory, and monitoring program. In this last year, we've been working on terrestrial monitoring for the last several years, I think since 2019 or so. But we were able to expand to riparian and wetland and LODIC monitoring. So LODIC is the wadable streams monitoring. And just want to share kind of like the breadth of this. So for terrestrial monitoring, we're University of Montana is working with BLM in all of the field offices in Montana Dakotas now. And we've got riparian and wetland and LODIC both kind of close to home, doing some work in Missoula, Butte, and Dillon field office, and then some scattered points kind of throughout central and eastern Montana too. Also wanted to share with you that I just found out this week, Bryce, that the BLM is actually using Montana or Heritage Program's range maps for doing plant QC for the AIM data collection. They're incorporated that into their QC process, and I think what a great use of that, but also wanted to let folks know that I feel like each year that we're collecting data, those plant observations are getting stronger and stronger, and really appreciate the BLM putting the effort into that, working with us to make sure that the botany is as strong as possible. I also wanted to mention to you that as part of this project, BLM's been really supportive in trying to get student involvement. For University of Montana students in the last couple of years, we've had interns working directly with field offices in Glasgow. And the idea here was not just to get students some practical experience, but also to put students in proximity to federal agencies in order to increase the likelihood that hiring becomes a little bit easier in some of these more rural areas where we just don't have that much crossover with interaction between students and agencies. And this year, we just found out that one of our interns, Tristan, is going to be working a little bit more full time with the BLM in Glasgow. So he's been there for the last couple of seasons, and it seems to have worked out that he's not going to be working directly for the government, but a longer term position with another organization that will directly contribute to the AIM program. So this is great news. I love seeing that is actually working out. And then also wanted to mention too that we've been working with the U.S. Forest Service in the past couple of years to do some monitoring for them too. And we're wrapping up a project through an agreement with Region 1, working with Michelle Cox and Vince Archer contributed to setting up that master agreement, and collected some more annual grass monitoring points in Lolo National Forest and Helena Lewis and Clark National Forest. And that program also has been really successful. The overarching goal of that master agreement has been also focused on student involvement and workforce development. And we were able to have one of the UM students who's been working with us in the summer continue on in the last year to work with Lolo National Forest right in their office, contributing to this program fairly regularly throughout the year. So that's also been a great experience, I think, for that student. And also I think the Forest Service has really appreciated the work that he's done. And then just upcoming this year, we're going to continue on with the assessment, inventory, and analysis monitoring throughout Montana. Full steam ahead with that, very similar to the amount of work that we did last year. And also looking to add on a couple other crews or one other crew doing National Wetlands Condition Assessment. So that's an EPA program that happens every several years. So for 2026, the plan right now is that we'll be completing those NACA assessments throughout the state of Montana. And then also wanted to mention that we're continuing to do some technical trainings for practitioners throughout the state. U.S. Forest Service Region 1 sponsored a grass ID workshop in Helena this year that was attended by folks from several agencies and then also I think a couple of nonprofits. And that's the second as part of that agreement that we've put on. And then I also wanted to mention that the BLM Montana Dakotas has been really, really involved in working with us to develop a more thorough plant ID, rangeland plant ID workshop for everyone collecting AIM data throughout the state. We've been collaborating with Nicole Hupp and Heather Neninger and pulled off a really, really great training this year, 3-day training in Zortman, Montana. Each year we do this, it gets better, and it's just a tremendous amount of work for Heather and Nicole. But again, this plant data set that we have as part of the AIM data sets in Montana is getting stronger and stronger every year. And then also wanted to mention that the DEQ is going to be sponsoring a hydric soils training that the O'Connor Center will be putting on this year in 2026. So that's kind of a TBA, but working on the development part right now, and hopefully we'll be completing that training sometime in, I think, like early summer this year. And then we couldn't do this without just including some pictures of hydric soils because they're so wonderful. Just to pause there. The other thing I wanted to do was mention to you that our associate director, Matt Trentman, he's an aquatic scientist and he's the person that leads our LODIC AIM monitoring. But Matt also has a big interest in collaborative interdisciplinary work. And he's been working with the Rattlesnake Creek Watershed Group here in Missoula. And Matt and the Watershed Group were successful in procuring some funding from the Bureau of Reclamation in the Water Smart program. And these Water Smart grants are focused on planning and developing watershed groups, local watershed groups. So they've collaborated together to put on 3 workshops locally in Missoula at the University of Montana. These workshops include attendees from city, county, federal, and nonprofit partners. And the focus for these 3 this year were weeds, water, and climate. So hopefully that will continue on. And I think it's been successful so far. A lot of good work done. And then I wanted to let you all know that I'm going to my first Grizz game this weekend. And even though I'm about to pass this off to Jennifer Jones, who's in Bozeman, so I figured we might as well include a picture of this kitty cat for a very short moment. But then we'll pass this on to Jennifer and she can finish up.
Great. Thanks, Kay. Can everybody hear me? I think I put my video on, but I'm just going to let Kay keep controlling.
You look good. Yep.
Move forward. So hi, folks. Thanks for having us, Bryce. Just wanted to touch briefly on a project we're working on that's related to our mapping initiatives. Some of you may have heard of the acronym LLWW. That refers to landscape position, landform, water flow path, and water body type. This is a value-added data set that's appended to our National Wetlands Inventory mapping features. It provides hydrogeomorphic or HGM information that supports the addition of potential function to these features. And this product can be used as a decision support tool, and it's intended to be applied at the landscape scale. So Colorado Natural Heritage Program and St. Mary's University Geospatial Services collaborated to create the keys and potential function for wetland LLWW. This classification and the workflow, it did not include riparian areas, right? Super important ecosystem in the Western US. So we're currently working on a project in collaboration with SMU, St. Mary's, to create those keys and new workflows to add LLWW and potential function to riparian areas. So when we do this work for partners, specifically, we've been doing a lot of this for the BLM. when we create mapping for them, we also add in that LLWW and potential function information, which can be really useful for them in decision making. One thing to note, we will be doing some field work in Montana this summer to validate this LLWW riparian output. So if there are any partners on this call that have a watershed of interest that they're working in that has modern NWI mapping, we could potentially focus on applying LLWW to that area. And then you would just have that additional information, and we would also get our work done out of it. So you can reach out to us. I think we're going to just share our email at the end of this. Okay, next slide. So that's, you can ask us some questions later about LLWW if you have any. So we also just wanted to touch briefly on some projects that we're about to apply for funding with the EPA. As a wetland program development grant hopefully this month, if it comes out. We have 4 primary activities that we're hoping to do through this project. And one, our wetland program plan is expiring this year, so we need to update that plan for the coming 5 years if we want to keep getting this funding in the future. We are also hoping to renew our support for the Montana Wetlands Council in coming years. In previous years, we provided a lot of outreach content and hosted some science-based meetings, obviously in collaboration with DEQ. So we're hoping to keep that going in the future. I know Kay mentioned some technical workshops that we've done in the past and we're hoping to do in the future. In 2022 and 2023 field seasons, we hosted 4 plant ID trainings, wetland plant ID trainings, excuse me. And those were an extension of trainings that were hosted by Andrea Pipp for many years across the state. And so we're hoping to get those going again with some additional funding. And then we're also hoping to do some more work in fire-affected wetlands. In the past 5 or 6 years, we've been doing collecting some field data and then doing some spatial analysis on remote data in fire-affected wetlands. And we're hoping to expand that into the eastern part of the state. So I think that's it for us today. And so we really appreciate getting to come to this and connecting with some of our state partners. And you can see all of our really close partners there. And I think we'll add our emails into the chat. And so you guys can reach out if you have any questions, any additional questions, or want to have a good watershed for us to do sampling in this summer. Thanks.
Thanks, JJ, and thanks, Kay. Questions for Kay or JJ on anything they presented, or to Jessica or myself on anything we presented?
Yeah, hi, this is Mike Hamill. I got a question for Kay.
Yeah, sure thing.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, are you planning on possibly doing the grass ID and the rangeland plant ID workshops in the future?
We could. So those the grass ID workshops were funded by an agreement with the U.S. Forest Service Region 1. And so that agreement is kind of coming to a natural end. But you know, like if there's funding to do it, we'd be happy to do that. Those workshops, now that we've got the materials pretty much developed, are pretty easy to roll out, and we really enjoy doing them too. It's a nice little break from the typical work that we're doing.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Other questions or comments on ecology information presented? I did launch a poll regarding that habitat conservation status dashboard and what you think of that vision to create that, as well as any other thoughts you have for improving that. But any other comments that people want to throw out verbally or questions? One thing I'll ask is, I see that Steve Carpenato is on. Steve, this might be a good opportunity for you to say anything about Wetland Council stuff.
Sure. Hi, Bryce, and hi, everyone. With the Wetland Council, we, like Jen and Kay had discussed, have been reaching out and working with some partners to do small projects and trainings like the hydrosoils trainings that they will be putting on this coming year. The Wetland Council also, in the coming year, we are working with St. Mary's University on looking at what the changes to the Waters of the United States rule that is being proposed will have on wetlands here in Montana, looking at two examples, one in the urban Gallatin area and one over in Shields, which was more rural. This spring, we will also be rolling out a new website for the Wetland Council that will hopefully have more information that will be easily available for people about work being done by all of our partners.
Wonderful. Hey, thank you, Steve, for chiming in.
Yep.
Kay and JJ, could you put your emails in the chat for folks? And also at some point, we'd like to get your presentation as a PDF so that we can share that with everybody.
I emailed it to you, but I will drop it. I'm just going to drop it in the chat.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah. Thank you, Kay. Any questions for presenters on ecology, either land cover and or wetland mapping, veg plot gathering, all that kind of stuff? Okay. I think we're going to go ahead and end about a few minutes early. Just a reminder on agenda here. We are going to take a break from roughly 11:45 to noon. And then over the lunch hour, I'm going to do a training on iNaturalist, the new web pages that we've developed to support citizen science data gathering and reporting. We're just seeing some amazing trends in that citizen science reporting, and we really want to harness it. And so just want to kind of bring everybody up to kind of a common understanding of what the vision is there. And I'm going to take you through on everything from how, the very basics of how I use iNaturalist on a daily basis to how we integrate it into our information system. So there's also going to be plenty of opportunities over that lunch hour to ask questions about our new website and other things. So please join us for that. And I saw that Jenny Stapp has joined us. Apparently they have kicked her off the jury. Jenny, would you like to say anything to our natural heritage partners?
Hello, everyone. It's so good to be with you. I joined maybe half an hour ago, and Bryce, you're right. I was not selected for jury this time. Just really wanted to say thank you for joining us. Thanks to the heritage staff and Kay and Jessica and others for putting together a great agenda for this really important meeting of the year. And partners, I think Evan and Bryce probably conveyed my thoughts earlier today, but please know how important and appreciated all of the really thoughtful communication that you've shared with us over the past several months. This has been sort of a year unlike any other, and really what we can hope for is just continued good communication and collaboration that you've shown to us. We really do appreciate it and look forward to continuing that collaboration moving forward. So thanks, and thanks for spending the day with us.
Great, thanks, Jenny. Okay, everybody, we are going to head into a break until noon. And then again, please join us if you're interested in hearing about either citizen science or learning more about iNaturalist. And I will note Kay just posted her presentation in the chat, so please go ahead and download that. I'm going to pause the recording, but we will record the iNaturalist recording over lunch. And then again, please join us for partner sharing. As Jenny noted, there's been so many changes, especially with our federal partners this last year. I think everybody will benefit from hearing what the latest is on their staffing, funding, structure, initiatives that they've got going on, and what their information needs are. So we will see you start back up at noon. Thanks, everybody. All right, folks, we're going to start back up for the afternoon session. And I'm going to share my screen and we'll take you through iNaturalist and our citizen science pages here. So these are our new, on our new website on the Collect and Submit Data tab. We have our existing MTNHP forms, which include information on how to use Survey 123 and to reach out to Braden on that. Did want to emphasize that we are more than happy to create Survey 123 forms for your data gathering needs. It actually saves us time in integrating the data into our data system to put that time in up front and make Survey 123 forms for people. So if your agency or organization has that need, please let us know. In regards to the new iNaturalist Citizen Science and Report Invasives tabs here, or buttons, just want to briefly take you through those. I'm going to start with the Report Invasives button here because this has evolved out of discussions with the Montana Invasive Species Council, and we are getting a lot of great iNaturalist data that on non-native species, and there are now 5 or 6 cases of non-natives being reported that we were able to pass that data on to weed managers and able to stop outbreaks. First record in the state for Palmer amaranth. Documentation of escargot population that is loose in the Missoula Grant Creek area. That is work is going on to squash those. So we just have this growing success stories in iNaturalist, and the invasive species managers at the Montana Invasive Species Council and elsewhere have really said, hey, let's try to grow this. And so on this Report Invasive Species page, there is a basic coverage of iNaturalist. You can use the QR code to download it. Tells people how it generally works in terms of take a photo or record a sound file. The app suggests an ID, you accept it or suggest your own identification. And then you've got this global community of iNaturalist users who come in and verify identifications, or they suggest another identification. So we have all these support materials, including these how to use videos, a playlist on account setup that includes the download and suggestions on what we think works best for copywriting the information in terms of that information being used by natural resource managers. It has a video on collecting observations, which we will do in a live demo here. Editing observations, making identifications, we'll also do that as a live demo today. And then subscribing to taxa or places you're interested in. And this is kind of a neat thing. If you want to know when the bitterroot are in bloom in your area, you can go ahead and sign up and get notice of that and go out and enjoy them yourself. So it's a great way to be connected with the plants and animals around you. Also on the Report Invasive Species page is a how to use presentation. And we may go through a little bit of that today here. And then business cards. And I want to click on the business cards because I want to get your feedback on this. And so we have 2 business cards currently posted here. One is just a business card on using iNaturalist with the QR code for iNaturalist. And the second is a general one, report suspected invasive species, with kind of this wanted poster on the front, and then how to report invasive species in Montana on the back, and what happens to that observation data. And then a link back to these pages on how to use iNaturalist resources. So the idea here is this card will be used at boat check stations, and they're just going to hand them out and encourage people to report things that they suspect are invasives. But the same kind of business card approach, we are currently developing a card for eastern heath snail which is an invasive snail that is established in the town of Belt and now outside of Lewistown, and could have major multi-million-dollar impacts on our grain industry. They climb vegetation, they climb vehicles, so they can transport around as fast as people are driving around. But we would like your ideas on what other business cards we should develop, both for native and non-native species. So we'd encourage you to let us know about that, your thoughts on that. If people don't like using apps, well, actually, there's one more app I'll go through first. That's EdMaps, and that's more for a little heavier users, weed manager types. But we want to make sure we post that because that is a very important application for reporting non-native species across the United States. Also, the Montana Invasive Species Council is another opportunity to report, and there are several ways to do that. You can report aquatic invasive species, noxious weeds, tree pest, feral hogs, other suspected invasives. So if we have people who are not into using apps, we've also at the top of this page literally said that. Don't like to use apps, but you've observed a potential invasive species that you're concerned about, give us a call, send us an email. Finally, we've included a link to WildSpotter, which is an application that is used for reporting invasives in wilderness areas and other public lands. It's not as widely used, so we're not emphasizing it. That's why it's a little de-emphasized, but we didn't want to exclude it. So that's what the Report Invasive Species page looks like. The iNaturalist Citizen Science page starts out in exactly the same way in terms of those iNaturalist resources, but then we mention other citizen science efforts that gather data in Montana, including eBird, Invasive Species Council EdMaps. Those are applications. And then on the citizen science program front, we have the Montana Citizen Botany Program and a link over to them. Audubon runs a bunch of citizen science projects. There's the Montana Bumblebee Atlas, Glacier National Park Citizen Science, Whitefish Lake Institute and their lake monitoring. And then we have Snapshot USA, which is a camera trap effort. And we'll hear from Bridget Rooney this afternoon about this new effort that they have to put out camera traps within an 80 kilometer, it might be mile, distance of the Lewis and Clark expedition's route through Montana. So it covers a lot of Montana for this camera trap effort. And camera trap data, again, will be a really important data source for us moving forward. Finally, we list Montana Master Naturalist programs because for a couple of reasons. One, these master naturalists can use iNaturalist to help learn what's around them, but also they have to put in 20 hours of service time every year to maintain their master naturalist certification. And so they may help grow the iNaturalist community. And then with all these citizen science efforts, the idea of highlighting iNaturalist at the top is that if they're going out and doing a focal botanical survey, for instance, they might report some weeds or some fungi or other native species along the way as they're traveling to their area that they're conducting a formal survey in. So that's the basics of it. And let's see. I'm going to go into this how to use presentation really quick because I want to highlight how we are incorporating data here at the Montana Natural Heritage Program, and a little bit more. I'll pause on some slides that are potentially of interest. This one is kind of highlights why we're doing this. Look at the growth in iNaturalist data. So they are now getting on the order of 8 million observations per month during the summer season globally, and the growth curve in Montana is similar. And here's data across Montana and across the West. And so there's just a lot of valuable data, both for native and non-native species that we as heritage programs should all be making use of. Here's some of those success stories I won't get into now. The basics of iNaturalist, setting up an iNaturalist account, recommended account settings, tips for taking photos, which we just want everybody to be aware of. Essentially the message there is take multiple photos, take photos of all of the important morphological features of species, just to get that message out. In the case of mobile animals, snap off a photo as quickly as you can and then come back and try to get a clearer photo if you have the opportunity. Here's some iNaturalist resources that I wanted to point out, and these people listed at the top have all agreed to be pinged in iNaturalist or tagged in iNaturalist. So if you are seeing a plant species that you don't know what it is and you can't figure it out, you can, on your iNaturalist observation, you could say at Scott_MT, and Scott Minsmore will be tagged. Could you help me identify this plant? I'm not sure if it's this or this. And we have these experts that have agreed for these various taxa to agree to be tagged. And so again, that's a way of quickly moving data from uncertainty to high quality observations from these experts chiming in. I'm going to skip over some of these. We encourage you to leave your data open, and we may or may not have a chance to talk more about that. Basically, as iNaturalist data gets moved forward, basically you would submit an observation and ideally take it as far as your identification skills or the iNaturalist built-in artificial intelligence will take it. And then once a second person has chimed in and 2/3 of the identifications agree, it becomes research grade. A common thing that happens in that situation is maybe it's me and I don't know what flower I'm seeing, and I say, well, it's Asteraceae, and that's as far as I can take it. And then someone else comes in and says it's this, and then I go, oh yeah, that's what it is. But I didn't really have the expertise to know what it was in the first place. And so therefore that idea is now based on one person's ID, even though it's still reaching research grade. So we do not use that for incorporating our data or data into our system. What we've done is worked with other heritage programs in the US and Canada to develop this list of I think it's higher than this now, but 731 taxonomic experts across the US and Canada. And we've identified what their taxonomic expertise is. And then if one of these experts adds their identification to a record in Montana, we will bring that data into our data system and we don't even have to give it a second look. Now, we do have audit reports that will catch problems, but this use of this expert table is a great way to go. And folks can contribute to this expert list using this link. And I'm going to go ahead and actually put that in the chat because it's important enough. I want to make sure that you have it. And so that takes you to this form, and this form has a link to that spreadsheet at the top of all of those experts and what their taxonomic expertise is. So if you want to check that list out and download it for your own uses, go for it. We would appreciate hearing back from you on this form as to whether we're missing anybody who is active in iNaturalist that could be considered an expert for an individual taxonomic group. Okay, let's go back to our presentation. It also covers how to subscribe to a place or a taxon, and place is the way to go. We'll go through that in a live demo. It covers identifying records and how you can use the filters. We may or may not have time on that front. Adding observations to a project, and other tips or tricks for using iNaturalist. It's kind of its own ecosystem. There's a lot to learn. And so we're putting the tips and tricks here, including if you wanted to help out with identifying, and you know that Matt Lavin and Lysandra Pyle and Peter Acuff and Scott Mintzmoyer are all going to do bang up jobs on identification, and you don't want to duplicate their efforts. These are all plant experts. You could filter them out by adding this and without ident user ID equals PL Acuff, Scott underscore MT, Lysandra, Matt Lavin. And we'll be doing some trainings regularly as part of this effort to help cement those concepts with people. Okay, so this is how we're integrating it. Again, our staff is working daily in iNaturalist, where we're doing identifications, flagging, reviewing records that audit reports have told us are important for us to review. Monthly, we download data into a working table. All this has been developed by Kyle Caskey in our program, and he's just done a great job, and that code is now being shared with heritage programs across North America, so they can do similar things. We have a taxa table that basically says whether a species can even be identified with a photo or a sound file, because some cannot. We have that expert table we talked about, and then we'll run some initial audit reports that say, hey, from this iNaturalist data that's now present, here's a list of species of concern, or here's a list of weed species that are greater than 10 kilometers from previous records. Go back over to iNaturalist to review those records. Our next monthly download will bring them in. We also have audit reports on the inside of our database once we append it to our database that basically tell us, hey, here's a new record that is extending the known range of a species, or it's outside of predicted habitat suitability models that we've made for a species. And then we can go in and extend the range, look at the record, maybe rerun a model, that kind of thing. Some of this iNaturalist data is coming in on private lands and has really been valuable to expanding our knowledge on private lands where we previously have not had data. Here's a really complex view of Kyle's Python coding. And then Braden had gone through this application, this iNaturalist non-native species watch list, where we're pulling in iNaturalist data from the surrounding region, none of it in Montana, but these are all non-natives outside of the state that we can look at how many observations are building up in that buffer, what the proximity to Montana's border is, and which ones should we be really closely surveilling around our borders to make sure they don't make it into Montana. We've got these geo models that we're now working with from iNaturalist that Braden went through. And again, this is giving us a good sense of stewardship responsibility in Montana. What percentage of the global range of a species is in Montana? And these geo models are a great way for us to approximate global range. Okay, so that's iNaturalist in terms of just the general nature of things. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hop on my phone here and just take you through. Just give me just a sec here. Okay, so we're seeing my phone screen there. And I just want to take you through iNaturalist. So again, iNaturalist, super easy to download. You've got the QR code from that presentation. You can go to your favorite app store to download it on your iPhone or your Android machine. It's this bottom on the bottom left symbol of the little white dove. So I'm clicking on that. And then we've got, let's see if I can move. There we go, get that out of the way. And then here are my observations. And I just want to kind of show you what iNaturalist can do. It has a built-in, I'm hitting the button at the bottom there. And then you can see different options for, on the right, submitting a sound file. The next one, moving from right to left, is submitting photos from your photo file on your phone or folder on your phone. The middle one is the artificial intelligence identification. And then the last one, and then there's a basic camera, and then the last one on the left is you don't have any files to associate. Which that you might want to do that. The reason that that is there is maybe you're taking a photo with a telephoto lens, and then you're going to match up and add the photo later, but you want to record the location while you're out in the field. So that's why you might use that one. So let's look at the artificial intelligence one, that top option, which I'm going to close out of that. You'll notice that the default option is that same artificial intelligence display. So I'm going to hit that and just hit it. And I don't have live organisms here, but let's see how it does. Okay, so we've got, you see the artificial intelligence is identifying at the top of the screen there, Western milk snake. We can page through random pages. Apolloni spinifera, got it. Western skink, got it. Here we go. Ooh, that's good. It backed off. It thought it was a Western toad initially, but oh, it got it. It's a Great Basin spadefoot, which we do not even have in Montana. So there's some examples for amphibians and reptiles. Here's some examples for invasives. Again, sometimes you have to adjust the zoom a little bit, but so got rush skeleton weed there. Sometimes it takes it a little while. Flowering rush it got. Let's see if it gets zebra mussels. Oh, little fuzzy there. Got him. Salt cedar. Got it. You get the idea. We could go through, some of them are funny in that they're completely wrong, but quite a bit of the time it nails it. And it might take it just to a genus or a general, some sort of generic level. Actually, let's see, I know that in the past it has had trouble with feral hog. Let's see what it does. Give it just yeah, a bear. Identified it as a bear, or genus Ursus. So no good there. But let's say we're going to go ahead and take one of these observations. Oh, that's a goofy one. American bullfrog identified. It looked like it had an owl. Okay, no go. Oh, here's eastern heath snail. That snail I mentioned earlier. Comment. There we go. It got it. Eastern heath snail. So let's go ahead and we'll take that photo. Just want to show you what it looks like. So after you've taken the photo, it's listing the artificial intelligence's certainty in the identification. And so it's taking it down to that tribe within land snails, but you can see the highest likelihood it's listing as 54% chance that it's eastern heath snail. And so I can accept it either up at that tribal level, or I can say, no, I'm certain it's eastern heath snail, and there's what your observation would look like. At that point, you could hit the upload button at the bottom. You can change the geoprivacy of it. Right now it's open, so the precise data would be shared with the world. But let's say you're on someone's private land, and you know they wouldn't appreciate someone reporting precise data on their land. You can obscure it, and that will generalize the location. We'll talk maybe a little bit more about the details of that in our upcoming conversation. Organism is wild. You can use this application to look at garden plants, and it does a great job with identifying many garden plants, but we don't want those garden plants marked as wild. So that would be an example of where we would report it as captive cultivated, either on the initial submission or when it gets identified by others in the iNaturalist community. You can add optional notes about your observation, which we'd encourage you to do. But you could see how fast I could just open up my phone and within under 30 seconds submit an observation for a species. So this is really handy. If you wanted to edit the record, you clicked on the pencil there. Again, that takes you back to the identification. The other thing that I didn't mention earlier, I'm going to touch that little eye circle in front of Eastern heath snail here, and it will take you into an account for Eastern heath snail, and you can flip through various photos of the species, learn a little bit about them and their distribution. In the area. And then you could select the taxon based on that, or you could go down the list and click the identify for other taxa to decide if you're kind of arguing between taxa. Again, if you're not certain, you could accept what the artificial intelligence has told you. We'd encourage you to either do that and then let others work it out. If you just submit it as this is alive and I don't know what it is, it might take it a while in the iNaturalist community to work it up for someone to review it. So it's better to kind of push the boundaries on identifying it to family or species so that others pick it up when they're reviewing things. So we could go ahead, I'm going to delete this observation, but we could go ahead and upload that. You can explore while you're on your phone, but I think other things within iNaturalist are best shown and demonstrated on the computer. So I'm going to go ahead and close things down here and go back to sharing my screen on my computer. And here we have iNaturalist, kind of your home screen for your profile within iNaturalist. And you can look at your observations. You can see a map of your observations, a list of your observations. Here's that Eastern heath snail. So again, here is where I could go, and I could have done this on my phone, but maybe I'm not 100. I want to just flag somebody, and I want to say at D. Bakken. Really surprised to see this in Helena. Can you help with ID? And then Dan is going to get a message in his message board, which is at the upper right here. And then he can come in and comment on it. He could come in and flag it as, problematic because it's clearly taken from a photo of a card, right? And he could say evidence of organism. Nope, I'm not accepting that. And it looks like Dan and others are already doing it. Thank you. Organism is wild, location is accurate. And what that is doing now is that is marking that observation as casual, and it's just going to sit in the background and not cause anybody any trouble. I am going to go ahead and delete this observation, but you can see the mapping here and the details of the mapping, and it's accurate to 6 meters is the way it's being reported. here. Okay, so let's say, let's move on from that and say we want to maybe just a couple other things while we're on this observation that we might want to add that to a project. We could add it to the Montana Natural Heritage Observations Project. And it immediately told us it didn't pass the rules, which this is a casual observation. Our observation project is not going to accept that. So it immediately got flagged as, nope, you can't add it to that project. A lot of these fields here on the side are nitty-gritty details that I probably will not spend time getting into right now. Let's take you over to a profile. So on my account in the upper right here, after you've set up an account, actually, before I do the profile, I'm going to just show you account settings really quick. If you do not have an iNaturalist account, go to those account settings. We have a full video on this on that website I showed you. But if you go to your settings and go to content and display, there's license settings. And I have set up my general settings to have no copyright on them so that anybody who wants to can use this data and the observation data itself in any way, shape, or form that they want to use it. We really strongly encourage you to set up no copyright on the observation itself. You can set up copyrights on the photo or the sound file, and a very common one, which I've done, is just attribution non-commercial. So you can use it as long as you're not making money off of it, and as long as you've credited me with my photo. So those, either no copyright at all or attribution non-commercial, would be good settings to allow people to use your data to maximum effectiveness, share it with resource managers and whatnot. Okay, wanted to make that point, and now I'm going to go back over to my profile, or excuse me, my dashboard. If you go to dashboard, I wanted to show you how to subscribe to species or a place. Again, I'm in my dashboard, scrolling down on the right, you see subscriptions here. Again, we have a video that describes this, but I just kind of want to give you a feel for it. You can subscribe to a taxon, or you can subscribe to a place. If you subscribe to a taxon, let's say you subscribe to eastern heath snail because you want to be aware of that. That will give you eastern heath snail records around the entire globe. And this is part of the beauty of the iNaturalist community, because there are species experts who identify things globally. And we have, for instance, there is a bee expert who lives in Singapore, that if you submit a record of a bee in Montana, he will probably identify that bee within 1 or 2 days, would be my guess. He's identified almost 2 million records within iNaturalist. But for the average person, subscribing to place makes more sense. So just let's give you an example of that. So we could say, I want to subscribe to Bitterroot. Again, that example of, oh, that's place, sorry. I want to subscribe to Montana. If I could type. Montana, USA. So that's my place. And now I can select the taxon that I want to. You could say, I want to subscribe to Montana. Now, every iNaturalist record, you're going to get an email every morning for every iNaturalist record reported across Montana if you leave your subscription at that level. But let's again say that we want to just see when we want to be aware of when the Bitterroot Louisia rediviva blooms. We can subscribe to Bitterroot and save that subscription. I've already subscribed to it, so it's telling me that is failed, but then I would be subscribed, and bring my email over, and then you're going to get a morning email. Here's my morning iNaturalist email to species that I subscribe to in Montana. And then I can go through individual records and help identify them. So that's kind of interesting. Pallid bat. Let's check that out. Wow. Oh, this is Dan adding records. That is definitely a pallid bat. And so I'm going to say I agree. We've already had several others agree to that. And so now the community taxon identification, we have 5 of 5 identifiers saying, agreeing that that is the species, pallid bat. And then I can just go back to my email and work through other things that I've subscribed to. Let's just maybe take another example here. We'll do a simple one here. Moose. I can also say, well, what does the artificial intelligence say about this record? And I can click in that suggest an identification, and you see again the artificial intelligence bringing up species that it's visually similar and expected nearby. And you could click on one of those and go look at the identifying features of those and decide how you want to identify it. One thing that we do in identifying is make sure that the photo generally agrees with the landscape that it's being reported in. So looks like it's one of these open meadows. We're not really sure, but it's a reasonable location. I might check out the details and the accuracy if it's got a really big accuracy bubble around it. If it does, I might say in my comments, I might say, we got to see this at Hawk. So I could say at Hawk 423. Could you map this more precisely? Something to that effect, in terms of the identification side of things. So again, if you subscribe and you can get the morning email and you're interested in doing that, it's kind of a fun thing to do to see what flowers are blooming around you, or if you have particular interest. Another thing that you might consider doing is if you're trying to learn a particular taxa, you could go to the identify button here and go to filters, and let's see species wise here. Well, actually, what I'm thinking is going to take too much time to get into, so I'm not going to do that. But you can track individual people that are really good about explaining why they've identified something as a particular species, and learn from them through iNaturalist. So it's a great, in addition to the artificial intelligence, you can learn from your fellow iNaturalist community members. Yeah. And now I'm realizing 12:42. I might just pause here briefly to see if we have questions. Or Dan Bakken uses this a lot. Dan, do you have anything else you want to chime in about that I've missed, or?
No, I think that's a good overview. I definitely think it's kind of fun to go in and look at individual species and just see what type of records. I know from the previous presentations you brought up that FWP Shorthorned Initiative. So
Yes.
Another good data source is iNat. They're easily identifiable. Folks run into them not infrequently. And if you kind of look at both the maps where Nat has them and where the FWP data are coming in for, they complement each other really well. So it's one more tool in our toolbox to try to get information, not only on a species, but it also makes things a little bit easier on our end since it's an automated upload process, and we're pretty confident in our vetting. So I would say one thing to add too, if you have like an observation you're interested in identifying, if you go to when you're when you create an observation, you can look over and there's a box on the right-hand side a little ways down that lists kind of the top identifiers of a species.
Yeah.
And I leverage that pretty frequently. If I see someone who has like 1,000 IDs for this, I'll just throw, at whoever they are, or just a string of them and be like, what do you think? Did I get it right or did I get it wrong? There's a guy who actually wrote the velvet ant field guide, which are pretty cool. If you don't know about velvet ants, they're these wild flightless wasps that run around and sting, and I don't know, they're armored and really cool. So you can be like, hey, I forget his handle, did I make a good call on this species using your guide? And he's usually pretty responsive. I've never had a negative experience calling people out and asking advice. So I think that's, to your point about connecting folks, that's a great thing.
Yeah. And that it's on screen now what Dan was talking about. Here's those top identifiers for this is false Eastern heath snail record that I test record that I sent in. So yeah, you could ping those folks and you can click on them and learn about them and their expertise if you want to before you contact them. Yeah. Open it up for questions. Or comments for that matter. Questions or comments from anyone regarding iNaturalist data and how we're incorporating it. Again, I want to emphasize that we have audit reports to tell us when to go to iNaturalist and what records to look at there, so that we're not looking we're not looking for a needle in a haystack. We're going directly to the potential needles. And then we can spend our limited staff time identifying those. And then if an expert identifier has identified them, they get brought into our system. And then again, we have audit reports internally that tell us, hey, this was a super important record in terms of its distance from existing records in your data system. And then those audit reports, many of those audit reports we email out to weed managers. We're increasing how many we email out to managers of native species, carnivore experts maybe, folks who just want to be made aware of the latest observations for species. So we can sign you up for those automated reports once we know it's high quality data. Any questions or comments? Tegan.
Thanks so much, Bryce and Dan, for talking about this. I guess going off of the comment that you made, I'm curious if there's any advice you can give on either things to improve the overall value of a observation. So say you're hiking somewhere and you see a bunch of a certain species, but maybe you're seeing it in much higher elevation than you might expect. Like, do you have ways that citizen observations can be more helpful, and then maybe conversely, things to avoid to avoid the observations that are maybe not helpful or are done in a way that is more challenging to
What immediately
interpret.
comes to my mind, Tegan, for what you just said are, one, iNaturalist is this bank of information that's sitting there. And so you might not even know how important your observation is until 2 years down the road when somebody is studying a specific species, and then they can go back to it, right? So adding comments in is good, and I know a lot of people do not take the time to add comments that they think are important, but adding the comments in, I would recommend on that front. On the other side of things, if you're seeing a lot of them, my general rule for submitting data when I'm in the field is I don't submit stuff within roughly a quarter mile. If I'm seeing a bunch of records of the same species, I'll wait another quarter mile before I put another one in as I'm climbing up a mountain or that kind of thing. Because I'm just trying to represent the species in space by my thinking. One thing I would avoid, and this is a problem with, and we filter it out, but eBird data where people for very good reasons want to have a backyard bird list every day of the year. But from the standpoint of informing natural resource managers, that doesn't really help. So, again, like representation in space and time, our data system is not really built to do handle radio telemetry data, which you're kind of like if you're reporting a species everywhere you see it within a few meters, that's not all that useful. Dan, do you have anything to add?
Not really. I think, you hit the nail on the head there. It's this big repository. So there's really no downside to adding more data, unless, it's eating into your time. So, I mean, like Bryce said, you wouldn't want to be photographing every single example of a given plant species in a field, or being like the guy who photographed individual pronghorn in a single herd. I mean, it's not bad. It's just not particularly useful from our perspective. I mean, it might have been useful from his perspective, but yeah, I think what I've found is that, being curious and just if you can get good photos of anything. I mean, sometimes you come up with real gems. I had a columbine over in the Little Belt Mountains. It turns out was a rare plant. I just thought it was a cool flower, so I took a picture. So, I'd say, my philosophy is if I stop to take pictures of everything, I would never get anywhere or get anything done. So I do it when I can and kind of prioritize stuff that just looks cool.
And I'm going to add a counterpoint to what I just said in terms of that backyard bird list kind of thing. There could be a good reason there on the documenting phenology front to do that, right? Like, when is a species first in flower? When is it setting seed? That sort of thing. So, but I think just sort of systematically throwing everything in your backyard in there every day is, not what we would recommend. Carly, let's go to you.
Thanks, Bryce. And if you already covered this, I apologize. My mind is blown with all the information you guys have shared already today. But I didn't catch it. Can iNaturalist take track photos, like snow track photos as observations? And does it have recommendations for taking, kind of the halfpenny type cascading pictures or anything like that, so that it helps people know, don't just take one picture of one footprint, but get a stride straddle context, anything like that?
So we don't have anything like that, and I'm not sure if iNaturalist, if the online help has a guide along those lines. I'm not aware of one. But that would be an example of a video that we should make here at some point. I know Rob Rich in Montana is so into that he would probably jump all over the opportunity to create a video tutorial along those lines. I know Dan and I myself, or the two of us, kind of tend to stay away from scat records and track records because of the uncertainty and the amount of time that we're able to put into it. But that doesn't mean that we wouldn't have someone on our expert list that we would trust and then incorporate that data. So it's certainly something that could be a growth area for us. Dan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just looked up some track photos. I'm not good with my tracks, so I stay away from them. I can do bear tracks, and that's about it. But I did see that, at least for a mink observation, the vision model was the one that suggested it. So that does imply, that within their AI framework, that tracks, are within that. I don't know how accurate that is. I could see that, like Bryce was saying, there's a little bit more uncertainty with some of that. So
I have
yeah.
an example. I was out on a hike this fall with my family, and the choke cherries were just thick. And so we found a bunch of scat. One was clearly a black bear scat. That the AI in iNaturalist was like it was like 95% certain that was black bear. Then there were a bunch of smaller ones, and it quite accurately said like, well, could be a black bear, could be coyote, could be skunk. And I thought that was really cool that it was doing that on the scat. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I do think it's a good platform. One of the biggest criticisms that I have with it is the lack of actual guidance on how to identify. You could take bear scat as a prime example. If you're within range of black and grizzly bear, you see a lot of people proposing size, like cord diameter, as a criteria for species ID, and their vision model doing something like that and suggesting species where it really, if there's a chance that there could be both, it probably shouldn't be identified to species. So I mean, I don't think it's necessarily something that they need to do better, but they don't, maybe this is intentional, provide very specific ID criteria beyond their vision model. So, and I think we do see a lot, maybe not a lot, but occasionally observations that really shouldn't be identifiable to species achieve research grade and achieve quite a few supporting or confirmations of observation when, from an expert opinion, you look at it and it's like, well, it might be about 75% that it's right, but there's also a pretty good chance that it could just be another species, or it's something that we need to look at the teeth or baculum or something like that. So, yeah.
Did that answer your question, Carly?
It did, and it spurred some other thoughts. So I will email you both and follow up with a couple of things in a couple of.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Again, we would love people's ideas on how we could support like outreach. If you're speaking to groups and you can use these materials, but it'd really help you present things. If we developed a few more materials, let us know. It's just been amazing data so far. So yeah. We've got time for maybe one more question or comment if there's anyone else. Also, kind of going back to something Tegan said, triggered something in my mind. We do take any record that comes into our data system that is precisely mapped. We will intersect it with a digital elevation model, and you'll see on the field guide, there's an elevation profile for the observations in our data system, so you can get a good idea there. So, yeah, just wanted to mention that.
Bryce Ellen had a question in the chat.
Oh. I see you are uploading observations from targeted research effort like bat captures. Are those observations duplicated in the submission to MTNHP data system? I'll let Dan speak to that.
I can answer that. Yeah, so I know got presented this morning, but they have these predictive kind of range model products that we're starting to use as global range. If you look at the bats, obviously bats are pretty hard to observe in some circumstances. So I threw in some pallid and cornurinus and eastern red bats to try and get that, like trigger whenever they revise those, trigger that expansion up into Montana and try to improve their product. So typically I avoid that duplication, and we have filters in the background where we're not going to get double pallid bat observations from that. It's purely to aid in their global range products.
Any last questions?
There's one more in the chat, Bryce.
Oh, is there? Is that Tabitha's? Any tips on getting iNat to give you ID for one of two things in a set of photos? Not that I know of.
Can I just jump in?
Yeah.
The thing that I've had the most success with is very much like having the same photo and having one really cropped just to
Oh, yeah.
the thing you're looking at. So sometimes that can help just filter out, okay, I'm not looking at the flower, I'm just looking at the insect, but
Yeah.
I'm sure you've already tried that, Tab, but
One thing I'll add is I didn't mention this earlier. I apologize. We are now having quarterly calls in the Natural Heritage / Nature Serve Network. And the developers of iNaturalist join us for those calls. And it's a dedicated hour and a half every quarter to talk about iNaturalist and how we can incorporate data better and things like that. And I'm pretty certain that iNaturalist is the artificial intelligence. Scott Laurie said only the first photo is being used. It's not your other photos. It's not looking at the suite of photos. It's only looking at the first photo. So keep that in mind on that front. Not to say that they might be able to integrate more photos in the future, but yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us on the iNaturalist session over lunch there. And I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording because I want people to be able to speak freely during our partner sharing session here.